So as we are letting people in, I will get started. Good morning, everyone. I hope everyone's doing well. My name is Lisa. I work at Learn Academy and I'm an admissions advisor and want to welcome you to this event, which is hosted by Learn Academy. So we're San Diego's original coding bootcamp. We've been operating in San Diego for over 5 years now. We have over 300 graduates, and we do offer a full-time, 100% online for the moment, full stack software development bootcamp. And this includes a 1-month guaranteed internship with a local tech company here in San Diego. And we are very embedded in the tech scene here in the area. And so we'd like to give back to the community through free workshops such as this one. So welcome to Build Your First Website. This is hosted by Learn Academy and our instructor, Andy Isaacs. So I will talk a bit more about Learn at the end, but for now I will hand it over to Andy.
Thanks, Lisa. Hi, everybody. So before we begin, I want to mention a little bit of code of conduct going forward here in the workshop on Zoom. Learn as a web development bootcamp, like Lisa mentioned. It was San Diego's, well, in fact, it was Southern California's first web development bootcamp. Learn is a full-time 4-month immersive program, and we specialize in career transitioners, meaning we teach adults who are not working as developers who would like to become developers. We teach full stack development, which means we teach our students how to build web applications. The big difference between a web application and a web page is, does the user log in? A web page is something that displays information. A web application allows a user to log in and create new content that is stored by the application. So a restaurant website that shows you the menu and the hours is what we call a static web page. Something like Zoom, however, is a web application because I can make an account and I can log in and create meetings that are more specific to my account. This is a web application, and that is what we teach here at Learn. Our mission at Learn is bigger than just teaching individual people to become full stack developers. Our goal is to build, strengthen, and diversify the tech community in San Diego. Hosting meetups like this is one of the ways that we can give back and offer our knowledge to anyone who's interested. At Learn Academy, we strive to create an inclusive and brave space. A brave space allows people to express ideas, challenge one another in a positive way, and learn from one another, but never disparage or cause harm. We consider these meetups an extension of our classroom, and we want to make sure that we're doing our due diligence to keep our meetups a positive experience for all of you. So if, on the extremely rare, off chance, any of the participants in our meetup or in our classroom violate or include our inclusivity or brave space or use insulting or profane language or images, we will remove that person from the meeting and report that person if necessary. Just want to put that out there so we can come together and feel comfortable here and learn some cool stuff and hopefully have a little bit of fun. So with that, who am I? A bit of my background and what I do here at Learn. My name's Andy Isaacs. I'm a graduate of Learn Academy and currently an instructor for them. I have around 10 years experience working as a project manager in the tech industry across the country, which means I would manage and translate what the client wants to teams of developers and vice versa. But one day I decided that I finally wanted to start coding myself. I wanted to be the developer. I found Learn Academy when I moved here to San Diego back in the beginning of the year, and I saw that their passion for teaching web development and growing the community was exactly in line with what I wanted and needed. One of the unique aspects of Learn Academy as a bootcamp is the fact that they provide a guaranteed internship with a local tech company. While being a student with Learn, I found a passion in teaching others and had the lucky opportunity to actually intern with Learn. I took advantage of that opportunity, and honestly, I liked it so much that I was offered the opportunity to become an instructor after. So, hi, hello, I'm Andy, and I'll be your instructor for the next few hours. A few other things too here before we get started. We have a camera and mic thing. So throughout this workshop, I'll be asking you all some questions and checking in with you to see where you are. No doubt you will have plenty of questions for me, and I welcome and encourage that. If at any point you are stuck, or you would just like a little deeper explanation on something I said, I want you to feel free to unmute yourself and just holler your question at me at any point. No need to worry if you're interrupting. It's totally fine. With that, I also encourage you to have your webcam on. It helps me see you participating and judge if you're understanding anything I might be teaching you. If you're uncomfortable with this though, that's totally okay. I understand. It just helps me feel like I'm not talking to an empty room. So let's dive in here in just a few minutes. First off, I want to go ahead and just kind of put in chat who we are, what your name is, and what brought you here today. Hi, Carla. Hi, Stephanie. Looking for a creative outlet. Excellent. This is the perfect place for it. Want to build more software skill set? Perfect. Hey, Miguel. Serena, desire to increase IT skills. Fantastic. Oh, hey, Brian. We have some more people trickling in. Temi, good to see you. Teresa, I want to learn how to get started to build a website for myself. Oh, getting started does definitely seem daunting. It can be a hard place to get going, not sure exactly where to start. This is a good place to do it. Air today in Seattle is too toxic to go to work. Ooh, that sucks. But I'm glad you're here.
Yeah, I'm feeling fortunate. We've got blue skies for the first time in a while here in San
Yeah.
Diego, at least where I am.
100%. All right, cool. I'll let you guys keep putting more stuff in chat if you like. Chat is a great place to be asking questions as well. If you're not comfortable with unmuting yourself, feel free to put it in chat. Just know when I am instructing or I'm sharing my screen, it's kind of hard for me to see chat at the same time. So if you feel like you put a question in there and it kind of goes unnoticed, Miguel here and also Lisa will kind of keep their eye on the chat and they'll kind of holler at me after a little bit of time if I don't notice it. So, hi, Sam. Filippo, it's good to see you. Cool. So before we get started here, I'm going to go ahead and kind of explain some of the tools and stuff that we're going to be using today. So first off, we're going to need a code editor. On the meetup page, I had a link of stuff you need to download. It was like Zoom and a whole bunch of other things. One thing is specifically, we're going to need VS Code. I'll put this into the chat in case you don't have the link yet. But this is going to be our text editor or code editor. So what is a code editor? A code editor is simply an application or a program that allows us to manage or write language that our computer can interpret. Similar to how we would open up, say, Microsoft Word or Google Docs and have it help manage our documents with guidance like formatting, spell checking, or flow, we use text or code editor dedicated to writing code language for us that can help us with things like syntax and spelling errors, formatting and tabbing that is specific to creating code that a normal document editor just wouldn't do for us. So what does it mean when I say I'm creating code or that I'm coding? Code is you writing a language the computer can read and then do something with it. So when I say I'm writing some code for the internet, I'm specifically saying I'm writing language that can be interpreted and rendered on the screen within our web browser. Code is awesome. It can be fun and really rewarding, but that doesn't mean it's a very easy thing to do. There's a lot that goes on in coding, and it's definitely very complicated. I want to say that what we're doing here today is just one very small part of coding or web development, and is a great place to start and get your feet wet. So with that, I'm going to take a few minutes here, make sure that everybody has VS Code downloaded. Good. And I'll show that website too, just in case. Let me share my screen here. Let's move you guys over to the side. And let's just take that URL. So we can go to https:// www.visualstudio.com, or you can just Google VS Code, and it should bring you to the site. I'm personally on a Mac right now, so it gives me this little button. If you're on a Windows or anything like that, it will say download for Windows. All you need to do is download that. It'll provide you a file, and then you just need to install that file. I'm going to continue on here in just a few minutes, but I want to give everybody the chance to make sure that's downloaded on their computer. Cool. Looks like Carla has it done and installed. Excellent. So what is our goals for today? Well, our goal of the day is to create a static single page HTML website utilizing CSS and Bootstrap to help us make the website responsive and mobile friendly. So what do all these words mean, right? HTML, this stands for Hypertext Markup Language, HTML. It's a bit of a mouthful there. It's the language we use to build the bones of our website. CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheet. It's the design language we use to complement our HTML. And then to augment this a little bit more, we use Bootstrap, which, as I mentioned, will help make it easy for us to pick and choose cool pre-made CSS designs, and also remove some of the headache of making our website responsive and mobile friendly. Someone I know often says, if HTML is the bones, CSS would be the skin. And I think that analogy is like super gross, actually. So maybe a better analogy would be, think of this as building a car. HTML would be the metal frame. CSS would be the cool design and paint job on that car. Then Bootstrap would be all the cool features you can pick and choose for your car to have when you're making it. Like a super cool dashboard or a sunroof or leather seats. Bootstrap is the kind of idea behind that. So with that too, what is the goal of the website? Anything we want it to be. In my example today though, I will be building out a basic portfolio site. Once we learn how to do this, it will be much easier to take this knowledge and build out something else if we so choose to do so. So let's see what we're going to have. So ahead of time, we built out this wireframe. What is a wireframe? A wireframe is a super simple draft image that provides us a skeleton of what our design is going to be. Just a graphic image. It helps us kind of lay things out a bit. Think of it as a blueprint or a web design in the web design world. We draft this image out with basic shapes and placement of content. So while we code, we have something to reference to and against. I'll put this link in your chat if you ever want to look at it. You can kind of have this up on a second screen or in the background. It's good to have that there. Go ahead and bookmark that. All right, and before we jump into coding, I want to mention these few basic things that build the structure of a web page. A web page typically has three main sections that a user or visitor can see. One, we have a header. This can hold the title of our page, perhaps a blurb about the purpose of the page. We would generally find our navigation here as well. Then we have the body. That's going to be this little area here, if you can see my screen. This is where we would find our expanded details about the page, our content, perhaps some call to actions or forms. And then down here, past the body, we're going to have in this section here called the footer, where we would find maybe a secondary menu, copywriter information, address to our physical location if it was a store, an email address to contact us, etc. Stuff like that. So again, web pages typically have a header, a body, and a footer. The three main sections is going to be main text, call to action, and details. Any questions so far before I continue moving on? All good? Thumbs up? All right, once again, I want to mention, feel free to unmute yourself and just holler right at me if you do have questions. Or if I'm going a little too fast or you'd like me to slow down, I'm totally for it.
And you can use the reactions feature too in Zoom if you want to just do a thumbs up there.
Totally, that's available to you too. Cool. Now I mentioned Bootstrap a little earlier. I kind of explained what it was, but let's talk about it a little bit more. So I'm going to send another link. This is another one you should bookmark and have up on your browser at any point. Bootstrap. So getbootstrap.com. Let's go ahead and just navigate there. So we'll get bootstrap.com. So Bootstrap, build fast, responsive sites with Bootstrap. So again, this is what we're going to use to kind of augment our CSS and our HTML. It's going to take away a lot of the hard coding and time-consuming coding that we would normally have because it allows us some components. I'll explain what that means a little bit later. But first off, I want to give you a little bit about Bootstrap, like who made it, some history on it. So who made Bootstrap? It was created by two former Twitter employees, Mark Otto and Jacob Thornton. They were a little fed up with how difficult it could be to create a mobile-first responsive website and decided it was time to create a toolkit that gave us everything we needed to get up and running quickly. What is Bootstrap? Bootstrap is just a giant collection of handy, reusable bits of code written in HTML and CSS and a little bit of JavaScript. We're not going to jump into JavaScript today, so don't worry. We're going to focus just on the primary basic fundamentals of HTML, CSS. It's also a front-end development framework that enables developers and designers to quickly build fully responsive websites. So why do we use Bootstrap? Bootstrap saves us a ton of time from having to write a ton of CSS code, allowing us to spend more time just designing the website. Also, we use it because it's totally free and it's updated frequently. So this wasn't something that was created at one time and just kind of left there. This thing is actually maintained. And they're always adding cool new ideas and technology to it that allows us, if we want to dive deeper into it and kind of expand upon it as well. So let's go ahead and kind of start doing some build out stuff here. Another cool place I want to mention is unsplash.com, because at some point here, we're going to have our design elements in place, but we're going to also want to have some images to go inside of those design elements. Maybe in our header, we'll want an image. Maybe in some of our little component areas that we're using buttons and stuff, we'll want an image to kind of show what they're going to go to. So just keep that in mind. Unsplash.com is really cool. And actually, I already have it up right here. Let's take a look at it. If we go to unsplash.com, we can see that we have this one main thing it says, the internet source for freely usable images. These are super high quality images. They're like very, very cool. In fact, I use a lot of these for my own like just backgrounds on my wallpapers and stuff like that because they're really great and they're free. They're royalty free. We can use them at any point for anything we want to. So thanks Unsplash and all the contributors there. So I was mentioning a little bit about the structure of a website. We have the header, we have the body, we have the footer. Inside of the web page, we have those three main sections, main content section, a call to action of the site, details to those call to actions, stuff like that. It's also worth mentioning a little bit of history too, or understanding about the structure of a website. It's worth mentioning that when we're designing our site, we want to think of the site as having columns and rows. Some older, and I generally mean pre-mobile design standards, work with a 10 or 16 column layout, moving from left to right. So really it's going to be, yeah, I got it right. Awesome, mirrored image. 10 or 16 column layout is kind of the older design standard. And those have their own advantages, but since we're using Bootstrap, it supports a 12 column layout. Reason for this is that it's easily divided up by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 12. This allows for ease of flexibility, especially for mobile, as we're trying to account for all the different viewports, different size screens. You'll see what this means as we build out the site, but I just wanted to put that in the back of your mind for right now. So now that I've talked to you for a whole bunch here, let's actually get down to it. Let's make some stuff. So the first thing we're going to do is I'm going to minimize my browser. I'm going to close my terminal. Don't worry about this. I'm going to close this up. What I want to do is I want to build a website, but first I'm going to have to create a folder for it. On Mac, we would right click on a desktop anywhere. And we click on New Folder. We have our new Untitled folder right here. And it moves it here for me. It could be somewhere else for you. Same thing on Windows. You'll right click, Create New Folder. From there, we're going to rename it. So for this, I'm going to name it something that's meaningful. I'm going to say workshop website. So workshop, I use an underscore and then website. And then I'm going to open up that folder right now. So inside of here, I can see that I have nothing there. Not yet, anyway. We'll get there. Next, what I want to do is, let's see here. How do I want to handle this? I'm going to go up to File. And then what I want to do is I want to create a new file. So the best way to do this, I think, actually, let's do it a little easier. Let's actually open that VS Code, that little application that I told you to install. We can do that. If I click on VS Code, it should bring up a new page. Any questions so far before I get a little too far advanced? You doing good? Thumbs up? Great. So if we open up VS Code, it might look a little bit different for you. It might say, welcome to VS Code, stuff like that. And up here, there will be like a little bar that allows you to close that window. Don't really worry about that. It just looks a little different, but it's the same thing. We're at our home page of VS Code. For there, what I want to do is I want to go to File, and I want to Open. From there, I'm going to go to my desktop, and I'm going to go to my workshop website, and I'm going to open that. Double click it. What this will do is will give me an Explorer right here on the left-hand side. It's just a little bar that right now will look blank, but as we add files to it, this will fill up with that directory. So what we're looking at is the directory inside of VS Code. Once we have this open, we can just click either this button here, this little icon, New File, or we can go up to File and click New File. Great, super easy stuff. What we can then do is immediately we can save this file as and type in what we're going to need. So this is important. What we're going to need to do is we need to name it a specific thing for HTML in our browsers to understand it. So first off, usually when it's just a single page website or the home page of a website, we call it the index. So INDEX. And then what we need to do is we need to give it an extension. So we type in index, we hit dot, we type in HTML. From there, what this does, that little HTML part, it tells our computer, hey, the index is the name of this file, but it is specifically an HTML file that allows us to then preview it inside of our browser. Cool. So now we've created this file. Let's see the other way that we can create files as well. We're going to need to create two more things. One more thing we're going to need to do is create another file pretty much exactly the same, but we're not going to name it index.html. Let's click on the New File button here. From here, we're going to name this one style, and instead of .html, we're going to use .css. We're going to hit enter. One thing I want to mention too, if you don't have icons like this on the side, do not panic. That's just a plugin that I have for VS Code. VS Code offers us a whole bunch of cool little plugins that makes it a little bit easier for us to see the GUI and what we're working with. So for me, I like to have those icons represented there. It won't look the same for you, but the important part is as long as the names are correct. So as long as we have index.html and as long as we have style.css, we're looking good. Additionally, we want to do one more thing. So we learned how to make a file inside of VS Code. We want to create a directory as well. So let's go ahead and click on this button that's to the right of Create File. We want to create New Folder. So when we click that, it creates a nice little folder here, and it's ready for us to type in some code. From here, we're going to type in assets. Ooh, if I can spell it correctly. Sorry, a little too early. So assets, what this is going to do, this is just going to give us a place to manage where we're going to take pictures from Unsplash, our images that we want, and keep them in one place. So what we've done now, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Can you just rewind just to how you got there? I'm sorry, I had to run to the restroom really quick.
No problem, totally. What was the last thing you heard?
I'm good with the style.css, the explanation of it, but then just what you're going to create right now. How did you get there?
Totally, absolutely, no problem. So all we did was we created another folder inside of our workshop website folder. So we clicked on this little button here that's to the right of creating those files. It says New Folder, and that just creates another folder inside of our current working directory.
Okay.
And we name it assets because they're going to be assets that we're going to import into our HTML later on.
Okay.
So what we've done here is we just built up our file directory structure so that way we have everything in one nice manageable place.
And it doesn't have an extension. It's just
correct.
A folder. Got it. Okay.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
You're so welcome. So if we look back in our Finder or if we use Window Explorer and we look inside this folder, we can see that we have workshop website, and inside of it, we have index.html, our style CSS, and our assets folder. Everybody should be at this point by now. If not, just holler at me. Cool. So let's dive into the coding aspect. I'll explain what the style.css is doing a little bit later, but right now we want to focus on index.html. To make sure that we're there, we click on index.html on the left-hand side, and we make sure that we're inside of it. We can move between other tabs up here quickly if we need to, but again, we just need to work inside of index.html. So first off, we're looking at a blank page. This part can be a little daunting. What do we put? There's so many things. Well, luckily VS Code gives us something nice. If we simply type in HTML, we can see that it gives us these little drop downs. What we can then do is click on HTML:5. This will, let me just scroll over to the side. This will give us, and I'll do this. And how about this? I'll also make it a little bit bigger. Let me move this out of the way, and I'll put on some word wrap for you guys. Oop. Let's do this. If we go up to view, we can then click on, let's see, where is it? Appearance, terminal window. I think it's in view here.
Yeah, it's at the bottom. Like
there it is. Yep, I'm blind. It's too early. If we click on that, it just gives us a little word wrap, which means it won't extend past here. It'll just kind of drop it down, but without creating new lines for us. Just easy to read. So what did we do? We typed in HTML, we have the :5, and then we hit enter. This gave us a boilerplate document set of code for us, which is really, really helpful. We don't have to type in all this kind of stuff. This is what builds every single website you go to. If you go to Google and you inspect the page or you look at the source code of it, it at its base form has this same information. So let's go over the top, and I'll go through each one of these sections for you to be able to understand what's going on here exactly. First, we have HTML Doctype. So what this is doing is telling the browser, hey, what we have right now is an HTML page. And this right here should be rendered as such. It's not a Word document, it's nothing else. Specifically, we're going to be working with HTML code inside of this document. Additionally, we have HTML language, English. This is pretty standard. What this basically says, this opens up, you'll see it starts here and it ends here. It wraps everything inside of it. So this tells it, hey, anything inside of here is going to be HTML tags or code that we're writing. From there, we have some basic things. We have our head tag. The head tag generally holds information that is not actually displayed to our browser. What does that mean? That means it has a bunch of information such as style sheets or perhaps Google tracking code, stuff like that, that the back end of the website, or I should say behind the scenes of the website, is holding onto and tracking for us. So in this case, it's holding some meta information, such as what our character set is going to be. The standard is UTF-8. I'm throwing a lot of different words at you, I get it. But this kind of stuff isn't too important to remember at all right now. Just know that they're there. So we have our char set of UTF-8. This tells it that we're working with a viewport, the content width of the device width, a whole bunch of basic stuff that helps our browser render what is being displayed later on. Then we have our title. This part actually does get displayed somewhere. Right here, if we look, if we save this page, we want to open up our browser real quick. Let's just do a quick check on this. We can have our browser in the background. We'll move this window down, and we can preview this page as is. If we click the tab that's right here, and we drag it up to our browser window, we put it in where the tabs usually go. Right now we see a blank page. We don't have anything here. But one thing you'll notice is in the tab of the site here, in the head, we see it says document. If we go back to our code and we change this to anything else we want, say Andy's new portfolio, portfolio site, and save it by hitting Command S or Control S, I believe, on Windows. Another way we can do it is just hitting save up here by going to File and clicking Save. We can then go back to our browser, simply refresh this page, and we can see that we've now changed the title of the site and what it appears in the browser. Any questions so far?
So I was not sure how you got the splash or unsplash inside this this program you're using right now. How did you get that in there? You pulled in.
Well, we're not using Splash or anything like that. These are just open web browser tabs.
Bootstrap, sorry. How did you get that in there?
Bootstrap here, it's just the website that we're browsing. So when I was showing a little earlier, like how to go to getbootstrap.com, this was just an opened up tab that we had left over. So we can actually close anything else that we have open here, if that helps make it a little less confusing.
Okay.
Because this right here is just Chrome. This is our Internet Explorer. This is our Windows Edge, stuff like that.
I got it.
Yep. So all we did was, in order to be able to see our website, anything that we've created so far on the index.html, we just click and drag it up here to the tab area, and we can actually get it to render for us inside the browser. Do a little preview of what we're working on. So again, it's going to be a white page. We haven't added anything to the body yet. We haven't added any real HTML code other than changing the title of the site. So in this case, we're going to be working on a portfolio site. In fact, I think I'll keep the title as is. So we'll stay, you don't have to have yours say Andy's new portfolio site. You can have it be your own name. You can have it say Temmie's new portfolio site or Dan's new portfolio site. That's totally fine because this is your site, not mine. So my example here is just Andy's new portfolio site. In fact, I might want to take off the new. It's my portfolio site. I've had this forever. Cool. So that's our title tag. That's what the title tag does for us. Anytime we want to change the title of the site that appears in the browser up here in Chrome or Internet Explorer, we need to make sure that we edit this title tag. Now, something to notice too when it comes to HTML tags is that there is usually always an opening tag and a closing tag. What this means is when we're writing our code, we have an opening tag that tells our HTML what is going to be following inside of the body of that tag. So I tell it, hey, I need a title. And then inside the body of that title, we have whatever it is that we're calling it. So Andy's portfolio site. Then we need to tell it, okay, when is the end of our text? So then we have a closing tag. That closing tag is denoted by the slash. It's usually a slash that handles on the front of it, of this closing tag. So it's usually the exact same thing we open it up with. The only difference is we have a slash here instead. Some tags are self-closing, and I'll get into what that means a little bit later. But briefly, it's the idea that the tag, when it opens up completely, say something like this, we'll say like an IMG, which stands for an image tag, it can be a self-closing tag, meaning we don't need to have another closing tag behind it. It has everything it needs inside of it currently. Again, doesn't mean too much right now, but later on when we start working with some of the different tags, I'll go over this again and kind of explain it in deeper detail. So for right now, I'm going to remove that IMG tag because it's not useful to us and it's in the wrong place. Great. So with that, you can see that we have a head tag that also has a closing tag for it as well, denoting where all this meta information is going to stay. Inside of there, when we move outside of the head tag, we have a body tag. This is where our HTML is truly going to live. When we're building anything, we're going to be working inside of the body tag. We're not really going to be adding anything else inside of here, except for some stuff like our CSS and our Bootstrap, which I'll show you how to import inside of the head. But generally, when we're making our new elements, we're going to put it all within the body tag. So that means between the opening and the closing body tag. Any questions so far? Doing good? Great. So real quick, just as a quick test, I want to just make sure that the site is working, that the HTML is rendering correctly. One of the first things we can do, one of the easiest things we can do is create a header tag or a heading tag. Well, wait a second, Andy, we have head tag here. That's a head tag. That's built for our browser. A header tag is something like an H1. With H1, it goes down to, I believe, H6. I have to take a look at. But generally, what we want to do is we want to have a single H1 tag. What is an H1 tag? Well, let me show you. We have our opening H1. We type in something into the body of it. So in between these two tags, we'll type in hello world real quick. And then we have a closing H1 tag. We need to save these files, and this is important. I want you guys to understand this. Whenever we make changes and we want to go see it live and we want to commit those changes, we must save the document every time. We can tell if a document is saved or not by looking up here in the tab. Next to the name, if we see a little circle that's white there, that means there are changes inside of that document that have not been saved yet. The way we can save that on Mac is going to be Command S, or we can go up to the top in File and simply click Save. You need to save your file every time before trying to render it onto your browser. Otherwise, you're going to look at old code. So very similar to saving a document before you can actually preview it in a PDF or something like that, you must save it. So with that, since we already have Andy's portfolio site here, right now I've yet to refresh the page, so it's showing me old information. The title isn't Andy's new portfolio site anymore. If we look at our code, it's Andy's portfolio site. That means I haven't refreshed the page. All I need to do is simply refresh the page and it will go look for that file and update it for us. And it will render it to our browser. So now we see Andy's portfolio site has been updated, and that little tag that I created, that heading tag that I created, is on the page now. So what is a heading tag? Well, we have it, like I mentioned, 1 through 6, and each one of these goes through a font weight of 1 being the heaviest, so it's going to be the boldest on the screen and largest. Then we have H2, I'm an H2. Then we have H3, I'm an H3. And then we have, say, H4. Generally, people don't really go below H3 or H4. There's just no use for it. It starts looking very much like normal text, and I'll show you what I mean by that. I'm an H4. Let's go ahead and save this. We'll go back to my browser. We'll refresh the page, and now we can see an example of this, these different types of heading tags that we have. So we have Hello World on the first one, which is an H1 tag. Then it drops down a little bit and goes to H2, which is a little bit smaller font and a little less weighty, a little less bold. Then we have H3 and H4. These are what we do in order to give titles to sections of our page. H1, this is important to remember when you're building sites, H1 should only be used once per page. So in this case today, what we're building is a single page website. You may want to build out multiple pages to your website. If you're using header tags, only use 1 H1 tag per site, or I should say per page. Why? It's SEO purposes. SEO stands for search engine optimization. I could do a whole nother workshop on what that means. But just so your information on this is Google tracks websites in live time, essentially. They come through any website that's on the internet and kind of tracks it and looks at these H1 tags in order to be able to get an idea as to what the page is about. So if you want to use a bold heading for other sections of your site, we would use something like H2 or H3, but we would only ever, again, have H1 on every single page one time. Any questions about that before I continue on? Cool.
So Andy, sorry, I think what my my confusion was earlier is I don't actually see my website that we're building. I don't actually see it. I don't know. I missed that step. How are you seeing what?
No problem.
The actual site behind the code. How are you seeing that?
Absolutely, no problem. So sorry, I might have moved on a little too fast on that one. What we need to do is we need to make sure that we open up our browser. So let's just pretend, I'm assuming you probably see something like this instead, right? You just have your VS Code?
Yes.
Okay, so for me, I have my Google Chrome down here. It might be on your desktop somewhere else, but you just want to open up a web browser.
Does it have to be Chrome or can I use Safari?
You can use Safari, that's totally fine. I recommend Chrome just because it works way better and it's one of the standards that we use usually in web development, but Safari is totally fine too. Okay. That's not a big deal.
I'll use Chrome for this.
Great. Cool, cool. So
open a new window?
Yep, just have it opened up as a new window here.
Okay.
And then we go back to our Visual Code. And from here, I just move Visual Code down a little bit. And I click and drag the title of the tab that we're working in. So index.html, I click and drag it until I see this little arrow that appears on Chrome. But I want to make sure that I put it right next to it. And then I release.
I don't know why it's not, I can't get it into the code, the name, the program VS Code. Is that what we're working in? I can't get my Chrome window to go in there. I can't get it in to.
Okay. No problem. Then let's try a different way from that. What we can do as well is we could go to Finder.
Uh-huh.
And what we can do is if we're inside of the folder of the workshop website, we can go to index.html, right click it, and we have open with. Or it might be if you're on a
right click at open with,
and then you might have Google Chrome available to you or Safari in this case.
When I right click index, it says open to the side and open timeline. It doesn't say open with.
It might be 2-finger tap. Otherwise, another way that we can do, let's make it even easier.
Andy.
Yeah.
I think she's on VS Code right now because when you right click the file on VS Code, it says open to the side and open to
right.
So she's not on the Finder right now.
Good point. I'm not on the Finder. I'm in the yeah.
No problem. Right. So let's do this. Let's go to Finder instead.
I could do the open with. I'm there now. So open with Visual Studio.
Nope, we want to open up with Safari because we want to preview it inside of our browser.
Okay, open with Chrome, I guess.
Or open with Chrome, that would also work as well.
Okay, I got it now.
Awesome, so now, there you are.
Now how do I bring it into, do I need to bring it in? No, I don't need to bring it into.
You don't need to bring it in from this point. So what we did here is essentially a different way of doing that click and dragging that I was showing you.
Thanks.
Totally.
Okay.
All right. Yeah, if you guys ever have questions or anything like that, please do exactly what she's doing. Just jump right in and let me know. I want to make sure that you're staying along with us.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Cool, cool. All right, so now I've taught you a little bit about H1 tags. We have some other tags as well available to us, what I'll briefly go over so we can understand what they do as well. So we have our header tags. We also want to have, say, regular text. We can do this with something called a P tag. And to another part of this too, I might have breezed over a little too fast, was if we're going to be starting our tags, we need to make sure we use left caret, then we call the title of our tag. So in this case, P, and P stands for paragraph, and then we close it up with a right caret. From there, VS Code does some really cool stuff for us. It actually creates our closing tag for us when we need it. If it doesn't by any chance, you can create your closing tag with that left caret slash the name of your tag that it is, and then the right caret as well. So anyway, from here, we can create regular paragraph text as well. We can say, this is some information about Andy, or me. So we don't need to keep referencing me at this time. From there, this will create a paragraph text for us that will be able to hold basic information, some basic text for us. We don't want to just write regular text out here without a tag because it won't get rendered exactly. The browser will still render it, but it won't be able to be styled. It won't be in the right place, and generally it will kind of break your code. We want to make sure that we always wrap it inside of another container, such as a p tag or a div, stuff like that. I know div doesn't mean yet anything to you, but just understand that there are other containers out there available to us. So let's just see what that looks like in the browser real quick. And then I'll show you something cool with the browser. So we have, this is some information about me inside of a p tag. Let's go back to the browser and refresh the page. And now we see it's wildly different from our header tags, our heading tags, I should say. We have hello world, and now we have our p tag, our paragraph tag. Inside of there, that holds the text that we wanted because we put it inside the body of that paragraph tag. Cool. So that's about as much as you need to know right now about some of this basic coding. Let's jump in and get into some Bootstrap. But right before I do that, I want to show you something else too. With this, we have something called an inspect element or inspect tool with Google Chrome. This is really good for helping us figure out what might be going wrong with our page if it's not styled correctly, or if you just want to go to any website, you can do this with it and see how they build their website. With that, if you're in Chrome, all you need to do is right-click anywhere inside of the page and hit inspect. This, it might show up at the bottom here, it might show up to the left for you, two different places, who knows. But this right here shows us on this left pane here the exact same thing we have inside of our VS Code. it's just collapsed a little bit. We have our Doctype HTML. We have our HTML tag here. If we click on this little arrow, we can expand it out. And hey, there's all that same information that's inside of our head. Then we have our body tag. And this is where we wrote our code already. We have our H1. We have our P tag. And you'll notice that as I hover over these elements, you'll see up here, it's highlighting for us to let us know where those exist from our code. So this is really neat. You can do this to any website you want to. It won't restrict you. If you go to Google's main website, you can right click, inspect, and you can see that there's a lot of code here. Whew, it's daunting, but you can see how they built out their HTML page. Same kind of ideas. They have their doc type, they have their HTML opening tag, they have their head, and they have a ton of style sheets linked inside of it. But just a little cool thing to show you, if you're ever wondering like, hey, how did somebody build this site? You can do like, feel like a little bit like a hacker and go look at their code a bit. It's kind of fun. So that's just something to show you real quick. We're not going to use that too much today, but it's something that you have now in your tool belt to use if you ever want to. With that on the right-hand side, this will show us our style information. Don't need to worry about that right now, but when we get into CSS, this will be important to be able to know and see how things are styled out. To exit this area, if you don't want to be seeing this up here forever because it will kind of follow you to every website, all you need to do is go up to the top right and click close. It removes it from your browser then. But it's always available to you by right-clicking, inspect, and hitting close if you don't need it anymore. Great. So let's get Bootstrap onto our site, and we can start working with that and actually building out this site using that framework we saw earlier. So what we'll do is we'll go to getbootstrap.com in our browser. From there, we simply click on the Get Started button. They made it really easy for us. Make sure you click Get Started, not Download. We just need Get Started. From there, it gives us some basic introduction information. It gives us a nice little quick start guide, letting us know some kind of jargon and stuff that's not really useful to us right now. But the important parts of what we want is going to be actually all the way down here to our starter template. They actually built out a nice HTML base code for us that has everything we need inside of it. So with that, we're going to go ahead and copy this. We'll hit the copy button here, or we can just highlight all this code and then copy. We'll go to our HTML page, our index.html. We can highlight all the code we currently have, and we can paste it right in. So this is going to drop in. We want to replace absolutely everything that we already had. I wanted to show you how to create your own boilerplate information first, because this is essentially the same thing, but just has a few more things inside of it. But we're going to drop this in right now as is.
Can you repeat that, where you dropped it in?
Absolutely. So if we look at our old code on index.html, we're going to take everything there. We're going to erase it. I know it's scary. But then we're going to paste what we took from the website instead, that copied information. So it should replace everything that we currently had with this new code. And if we look at it, it's essentially the exact same thing. We have Doctype HTML, we have HTML tags, we have our header tag. Here they gave us a little commenting areas, which is nice. So anything that's a comment in green like this means it's not rendered and it's not listened to by the computer as far as trying to look at it as code. This is just plain basic human comments for each other, some basic information. With this, they have their meta tags here, they have their viewport information here. Then they add a little something extra. They have their Bootstrap CSS. What this is doing is it's going out and it's looking for a style sheet at this website and importing it into our web page for us. It has a little bit of extra properties to it, which we don't need to worry about right now, but they're here for us. So we have this nice CSS Bootstrap style sheet that is ready for us to give us everything we need in order to start creating components in HTML code. Then we have a title here, which we had Andy's portfolio. We'll just call this instead. We'll say my portfolio site, or anything that you want to name it, because again, all this is doing is just showing up here in our browser. And then we have some body, and they gave us some nice boilerplate code as well. So they gave us an H1 tag that says hello world. And then down here, we'll see that there are some script tags. These are little tags that tells our HTML to stop being HTML for a second and look at JavaScript. We need these tags here in order for some of the elements that we're going to use from Bootstrap to be rendered correctly. It needs a little bit of cool logic functionality to it that is beyond what normal HTML and CSS can do. We're not going to jump into those. We don't need to. All we need to know is that they are living here at the bottom right before our closing body tag. So with that, we never want to code or erase these down here. We're going to work within our body tag and leave those happily where they are right now. So real quick, let's save this page. Let's go back up here to where our site was. And let's refresh the page. We'll see that it's changed just a little bit. We have Hello World. Its font is a little bit different because it's using more of a Bootstrap font that is a little bit more pleasing to the eye. And that's it. So let's actually get around to making that site with that wireframe I was mentioning a little earlier. So let's do this. Let me pull up that wireframe. And if you guys don't have it still, if you didn't bookmark it by chance, I put it in chat again for you. We'll go to this wireframe and look at it. So again, we have a header here, we have our body information, we have a footer. So the first thing we want to do is let's work with our header. I want to have a nice big header here. It doesn't necessarily have to say Peppermint Patty, but I want to make sure that it has an H1 tag inside of it and maybe an H2 tag, something like that. We could code this hard by hand, or we can use what Bootstrap offers us. And Bootstrap offers us a lot of cool stuff. So we're just going to keep this wireframe on another tab in our browser, and we're going to go over to Bootstrap. Now, from here, we're going to look on the left-hand side and look at components. With components, we're going to see that once we click it, it expands out and we have all of these cool things available to us. You can look through these if you want. We're going to focus on just a few of these, but there are a ton of different things. It gives us a nice example of what the code is that we're going to use when it's rendered to the page, and then also shows us what the code is in order to make that happen. So in this case, since we want a header, this is generally called a Jumbotron in Bootstrap. So we're going to click on Jumbotron on the left-hand side that's underneath components. From there, we're going to scroll down and see all the different variations that we have available to us. And by all the different variations, I mean they really only have 2 here for Jumbotron. They do the job well. Fluid Jumbotron actually looks exactly like what we're looking for here. So what we're going to do is right below it, it gives us the code that we need to implement in order to put it onto our site. So all we need to do is go to the copy section, click that, or if you want, you can highlight and copy as well. We're going to go back to our Visual Studio Code text editor. We'll remove this H1 tag because we don't need that. And in its place, we're going to paste right after the body tag, the opening body tag, we're going to paste in that code. So we have a div class container that is named Jumbotron, Jumbotron-fluid, which I'll get a little bit more into like what these naming conventions are and what they're doing exactly. But this allows our class to look at our style sheet that Bootstrap offers us and style this little bit of code in the current way that we want. So we have div class, we have another div inside of it, container, and then you'll see our friend H1. Inside of it, it says fluid Jumbotron. We can replace this with something a little more useful. We'll say, welcome to my portfolio. Ooh, again, I need to learn how to spell it. There, welcome to my portfolio. In between the opening H1 and the closing H1. Then we'll see, again, another friend. We have our P class, our paragraph. Inside of this, it has some basic template information, some boilerplate kind of code that we don't really need. It says this is a modified Jumbotron that occupies the entire horizontal space of the parent. We can put anything we want inside here. So if we want, we can have some sort of lead-in text as well. So we could say, please see, since we're building a portfolio site, I think everything that's going to be below my header section is going to be pretty much like, I don't know, galleries perhaps of some cool art or whatever I might be working on. So please enjoy my portfolio, once again, portfolio gallery below. So let's go ahead and save this. We keep it, our text, whatever we want inside the body of our tags. Let's save that, and let's go back to our portfolio site that we were working with. If we refresh that page, we now already have this huge Jumbotron that's sitting nicely centered already for us as well. I want to style it a little bit more at the top of our page in the header. And those text changes that we made are already reflected and updated for us as well. So we have, welcome to my portfolio. Please enjoy my portfolio gallery below. Any questions so far as getting that Jumbotron installed? Doing good? Great. Cool. So now we have a Jumbotron. It's not styled exactly the way I want it though. If I look back at my, wireframe, I guess it kind of is, but I want to do something a little bit more to it. I want to snazz it up. Again, our wireframe is really just for showing like where placement of things are going to be. We're free to style it however we want. So a way to do this, let's go back to our code. And remember, we made a style.css tag a little earlier. I should say a file earlier. Reason for that is we're going to also, on top of our Bootstrap CSS, we're going to have our own CSS. This means we're going to be able to style certain elements that Bootstrap offers us to our own specifications. We can modify them just a little bit however we might like. To do this, right below the link rel for our Bootstrap CSS, we can see that this is all on one single line, but thanks to our word wrap, it looks like multiple lines. But technically, it's all just on line 9. On line 10 here, I'm going to make a little bit more space, and I'm going to import this style.css in. So with that, to do it, it's going to be very similar to how we did Bootstrap, but we're going to type it out instead. We're going to start it with a left caret. We're going to type in link, rel, hit equal. So we have our link. It's saying its relative is a style sheet, and we put that within quotes. So again, we open it up with some quotes. We type in style sheet, and then we need to tell it where the style sheet lives. So we give it an href. Href stands for hypertext reference. And what all this is doing is just telling it, hey, this is where we can find the file that we're going to be importing in. So we tell it href. We follow it up with an equal sign. If we're actually just watching up here, it's basically the exact same thing. And then we're going to open it with some more quotes. Now we can type in where this style sheet exists. This style sheet that we created, style.css, lives within the same folder as our index. Doesn't really seem like that matters a whole lot right now, but it will later on when you're building more complex websites. But for right now, just know it's inside the same folder when we first created it. So with that, all we need to do is type in style.css. And with that, we close that link up. If we hit save, we're not going to see any real changes to our site yet. If we go preview it, nothing's changed whatsoever because we haven't added anything to that style.css. What I want to do is, I want to make sure that this text maybe is perfectly centered in the middle of the screen instead. I think that will feel good. So with that, what we can do is we can go to our style.css up here if it's open. If it's not, all you have to do is just click on this Explorer icon and it will expand out this box again for us. From there, if it's not open, we just click on style.css. So CSS is coded slightly different. The way CSS is able to target elements inside of our HTML is by looking at things called the class or IDs. And what we can do here is we can see that this class parent container has a class name of Jumbotron and Jumbotron Fluid. That's good, but what we need actually is going to be the container here because this container encompasses our H1 and our P tag and closes up right here. So it opens up on line 16, closes on 19. And inside there, this class, we can add style specifically to this class that will affect every child element inside of there. So this is considered a parent container, and everything that's inside of it is considered a child element because it lives within it. So with that, I'm going to just copy the name container. I'm going to go to style.css. And what I'll do is, in order to be able to target that specifically, I want to hit dot and then type in container. So what this does is it says there is a class of container and I want to access that. I will put a space and we can open up the code of this styling by having some curly braces. And these are right above your return button on your keyboard. So we have a left curly brace and we have a right curly brace. We open that up by hitting enter so we can drop it down to the next line of code. And from here, we can do all sorts of stuff. So this specifically says to our index.html that we're targeting container and we're going to add some cool styling specific to that parent element. And it should affect everything that happens below it. So with this, I want that text to be centered. I can type in some cool stuff that CSS recognizes and VS Code recognizes in order to be able to give us some easy to type and easy to work with things. So specifically with this, I want to work with, I'm thinking it'll be pretty easy if we just do some text align. So if we type in text, we can see that VS Code is like, hey, cool, text? Well, we got all these different properties that we can use with it. Specifically, I want to use text align because I'm going to align my text to the center of the screen. So we have text align. And from there, I don't even have to type anything else. VS Code is cool this way. I can just hit center. But I want to break down a little bit for you. So with this, we have text align as our property name. We then tell it with a colon what to do with that text align property name. And with that, we're telling it, hey, when you have text, we want to align it to the center of the screen or center of its parent element. So we save that. And if we go back to our portfolio site and we hit refresh, we'll see that all of our text has now moved to the center of the screen. Everybody doing good so far? So cool. Now we have our text centered. This is great. Excellent. We're one step closer to what we wanted. I also think maybe I want a background to us. Gray is a little bit bland. I want a cool background. So this is where Unsplash comes in play for us. Let's go to Unsplash. Let's do unsplash.com in our browser. And let's just go look at some cool photos real quick. Let's see if there's anything here on the home page. There generally isn't necessarily something cool. That's kind of neat, but I feel like that would give me a headache after a few minutes. Oh, hey, that looks like some code. Let's scroll back up to the top and I'm going to click on wallpapers instead. And let's see. Oh, the green is actually kind of neat. I think I like this. Yeah. So I've selected a picture that I like by just simply clicking on this, clicking on that image there. And then in the top, I can click on download. When I click on download, it gives me this little pop-up that says, hey, cool, where would you like to save it? I'm going to go into my desktop specifically. Let's see, let's expand this out. I can click this little button here to expand it out. I'm going to go to my workshop website. I'm going to go to assets. And I think I want to save it as something a little bit less daunting of a name. Let's just call it background. So what I'm doing is I'm saving inside of workshop website, inside of the assets folder, and then I'm saving the name as background. It will be saved as a JPEG image for me. So I'll hit save. Cool, it saved it. Let's go back to our VS Code. If we look inside of assets and we did this right, we should now see when we click on the assets folder, background.jpg showing up there. Cool. What I'm going to do here is, if we look back in our HTML, we can see that we have an even more parent element to our Jumbotron. We have this div class right above container that wraps everything for us. So that is the very top parent container. Inside of there, it has its own class name. Much like container had its, this one is targeted by Jumbotron or Jumbotron Fluid. With this, I think that I want to target Jumbotron Fluid because it's an add-on here, but it just kind of helps define what Jumbotron is. I'm going to go back to my style.css. And right above container, I'm going to hit enter so I can have some space. And I'm going to hit dot and just kind of paste that in. Or if I want, I can type it in as well. That's totally fine. But I'm going to be targeting that class of Jumbotron-Fluid. I'm going to open up with some curly braces. And from here, I'm going to use a couple more things, a couple more properties to target. So one second here, let me just move this out of the way. From here, I can now talk to my background. I can talk to the background of the parent element of Jumbotron Fluid by typing in the property of background dash image. Image. And again, as I was typing that, you can see as I'm typing in background, it already has all these different properties we can play with, but we're going to focus on specifically background dash image. If we click that, it already gives us our colon and it tells us, okay, cool, what do you want to do to the background image? Well, in this case, I want to use a URL. And even though I'm not going to a URL that's outside of my web page, I have it stored on my local machine. We need to tell it basically just to look inside of its own folder, inside of assets for it. So with that, when we type in URL, we can click URL again, and it will give us URL with parentheses. These parentheses are where we're going to add in the directory, or I should say the image file location. So with that, we have URL. We're going to put in some quotes because we're kind of doing some plain English here somewhat. And what we need to do is we need to tell it, hey, since style.css is living inside of our weekend website folder, we need to go into a folder called assets and grab background.jpg. How do we do it? We type it like this. We do dot /. So that dot denotes look inside of our current folder. That / tells it look inside of a folder that lives where this current file is. And then we're going to type in assets. So we're telling it inside of your current file structure, we look for a folder called assets. And then from there, we put one more / and we tell it what is the file that we want. We want background.jpg. So again, look inside of assets, and inside of assets, we want background.jpg. Let's go ahead and save that and just see what we have so far. Go back to our portfolio site. We'll hit refresh. And cool, we've got pretty close to what we want. The image is gigantic, not exactly. So we need to do a few more things to our styling in order to make it a little bit better.
Andy, sorry, my webpage doesn't have the background and it's not centered.
And it's not centered yet?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you want to share your screen with us?
Sure.
That'd probably be the easiest for me to help troubleshoot you.
You want to see the Visual Studio page?
Yes, if you wouldn't mind. I'll stop my sharing real quick so that way we can see yours. Okay, cool. So we have link relative style sheet href. That's looking good. Oh, I see the problem. See on line 10, inside of our href, so we have link rel style sheet href. You see that your quote mark is outside of the caret. It needs to be on the inside of the caret at the very end.
The quote mark.
You have a quotation mark on line 10 at the very end.
Okay.
That quotation mark needs to be inside of the caret. So put it one side to the left of that. There we go.
Oh.
Now, if we save this, that might fix the problem that we're looking at. Let's go back to index. Let's refresh this page.
Oh, okay.
Oh, there it is. Cool. And the image again is huge, but it's there. We'll fix that problem of the image being gigantic a little bit later.
Thank you.
But yeah, when we're looking at that is we need to make sure that all of our properties that go inside of our tags stay within that tag. These carets denote where the beginning and end of that tag is for that specific tag. Your quotation mark was just floating out in space, essentially. So we need to make sure that was back inside of there.
Thank you.
No
I don't
problem.
have it. I don't have the background either.
Okay, you want to share your screen and we can walk through it?
Sure.
Thank you. Okay, cool. So it looks...
I'm showing you the style, or I'm showing you, there's my style.
Okay. So we have assets. Let's take a look at the index here. All right, we have link, style sheet, href, style.css. That's looking good. All right, let's go to style.css then, that file, please. We have Jumbotron. Okay, so what we're forgetting here is, look on line 4, we have that dot container.
Yeah.
That's a class, so we need that dot as well for up on your Jumbotron fluid. So on line 1.
Right here, dot.
Yep,
Right there.
precisely. Cool.
Okay.
Now, if you hit save on this, you should be able to save everything else too and refresh the page. There we go.
Okay.
So,
awesome. Thank you.
awesome. Very cool. All right. No problem. Anybody else having issues with the CSS? Not yet? Cool, cool. Not yet. I say that jokingly a little bit and kind of lovingly, because everybody eventually does have problem with CSS. It's one of the harder things to code amazingly. As a fundamental coding, it can be a little bit difficult. That's why we use Bootstrap. And we do very minor changes to the CSS. Cool. Let me share my screen again. All right, you guys can see everything? We're good? Excellent. Cool. So we made our changes. We put images to our background, but the image is gigantic. So that might be a bit of a problem. There's a few things that we can do in order to fix this. Let's go back to our VS Code, and we'll go to our style.css. I'm just going to move this out of the way for right now. So we have our background image, but we can add some more stuff to it. So far, we've only ever added like one property to each one of our CSS tags, or our classes, I should say. We can add a lot more, so long as that on our line that we have a property ends with a semicolon, we can drop down and start adding some more stuff to it. So in this case, I think I want to do, let's take a look at what background offers us again. So we have background, ooh, a whole bunch of stuff. Let's do background position. So if we click on background position, it opens it up for us, and then we can type in something like, I want to do center and center. So this is a property that allows 2 arguments to go into it. Each one of these areas that are after a property, we have an argument that's passed into it. So in this case, this one can take 2, and this one's going to be the vertical position for the first one, and then this one's going to be the horizontal position. So I'm saying I want it to be vertically horizontal, and I want it to be vertically center and horizontally center as well. So if we do that, let's go see what we've changed. We'll save this, and we'll go back and we'll just kind of preview. Cool. So this moved my image from being just the top left of what was being displayed to moving it up and putting it center to that parent div element. Now, that's pretty cool, but I think I want it maybe a little bit smaller. I think the size overall is huge. I think it expands farther than what the browser is actually showing us. Our image is probably this big, while our browser is really like that big. So let's make it a little bit smaller. Again, I'm going to drop down another line, and so long as each one of these ends in a semicolon, I can add another property to it. With this, I'm going to look at background again. I'm sure there's something here that will help us. Background size. Let's do that. So if we do background size, this I can work in multiple different ways of telling it measurement. In this case, I'm going to use something simple called percentage. So I'm just going to say I want it to be 100% of my browser, of that parent element. I don't want it to be any bigger. I don't want it to be any smaller. I want it to be exactly 100% of that size. From here, I'm just going to save. Let's go back to my portfolio site. Let's refresh. Cool. Now it's made it a little bit smaller and less kind of in my face. It looks more like leaves there. I like that. It looks cool. All right. Now, another thing I'm kind of noticing too is that while the text is centered, I can't really see what's going on there. The text is kind of, specifically with this image, kind of lost to the background image. What can we do? We can go back to our style CSS, and we know our text is already being converted thanks to our container class. So what we can do is we can drop down, as long as it has a semicolon, drop down and add some more information to it. So in this case, I want to change the text color. So let's see what text has available to us. I think nothing here specifically. Let's just type in color. So we're able to target the text color by simply just typing in color. It's great. If we hit color, we give it a colon. From here, I'm just going to type in a protected word, white. Let's just do that. We'll hit save. So we have color, colon, then we type in white, we'll do semicolon, we'll save the page and go take a look at our portfolio site again. And there we go. At least for my image, this looks a whole lot better. You can type in a whole lot of different colors into the color area here, the properties, inside of its argument. You could do something like blue, you could do red. There's all these ones that are already kind of built into CSS ready to go for you. Or you can do hexadecimal colors as well if you really want to get crazy and have a truly unique color to you. If you go to Google, we just do, actually I'm already there, so we're good. I'll just type in hex colors into Google. And let's see, actually I think we can do colors or color picker. Let's see, color picker, there it is. So if we type in color picker, it will actually, Google themselves offer this on their page. You can click anywhere around here and get that perfect shade of color that you're looking for across the spectrum of the rainbows and all the different kind of colors there are. And then down here, they offer you the hex codes and the different codes that we can put into our CSS. So let's say I wanted, let's go with something a little bit off-white. Let's go near purple. I think that's kind of cool. Mauve kind of color. Here, after I've selected that's the exact shade that I want, this is a nice preview of it. Down here in the hex area, let's make that a little bit bigger. Down here in the hex area, it gives me this code, including this pound sign. So this is a hexadecimal color. I will take this, copy it, go to my VS Code, and instead of having white here, what I can type in instead is I can just paste in that code. If I hit save, I can go back to my portfolio site, hit refresh. Not much of a change because it's still pretty white the way it is, but let's try maybe a really crazy color. We'll do purple. I'll take this hex code instead, pop it in. Ooh, let's do that instead. I'll save it, refresh the page, and now I get that exact same shade, which is really hard to read now, but that exact same shade that I caught from Google here. So there's a whole bunch of different hex codes out there. You can also use RGB, CMYK, all these different ones. The easiest, honestly, the best one you could stick with is going to be the hex code. Just use that one.
Can you tell me what's the URL for color picker? I'm not finding it.
All you have to do, I just typed in color picker into Google and it offered me this right here.
Okay.
There's no specific URL for it. Is it not showing up for you on Google?
No, it's not. It gives me, it actually does a web search for sites and then gives me the results. So I don't know why.
I'm not sure either. Let's see, maybe there might be another one out there that makes the life a little bit easier for us. Let's see another variation, HTML color codes. This would be one. So HTML color codes is also available to you. And you can just click anywhere here, drag one of these down to get a specific color, and then you'll get your hexadecimal up here. So pretty much exactly the same. Or up here, it also says your hex as well. So that's htmlcolorcodes.com/color picker. That work for you?
Yes.
Cool. All right. Happy to hear. Great. So I'm going to change this back from that crazy purple color back to a white. And then make sure it's changed up. It has. Great. Awesome. So we have part one of our wireframe finished up. We have a header. That's technically a Jumbotron, my Bootstrap standards. We have an image to it. We have the text nicely centered. Now we can move on to another part. So another thing to remember when it comes to coding is that code reads from top down, from left to right and top down. So what that means for us is as we're coding, if we want to add things that are below our header, our Jumbotron that we have here, we wouldn't put it above our header. We need to put it below our header. So everything that's added next is going to be below that. So I'll make a little bit of space for myself. I'll make sure that I'm not still within inside these divs by any means. And then I'll go back to my wireframe and see what we have available to us. So this here looks like just a bunch of random squigglies. Obviously, this would hold some text for us. So it looks like 2 paragraphs worth of text. Cool. I think we know what to do there. Let's move your guys' face out of the way here and look at my notes. Great. I got everything I need here. Excellent. So what I can do here is I can just simply type in paragraph. So that P tag that I was talking about a little earlier. And from here, I just want some placeholder text. I don't really care about what it says specifically. I want it just kind of be placeholder. So what I'll type in is something called Lorem Ipsum, which is kind of fake Latin. It was made years and years and years and years ago. I can't remember the exact history behind it, but essentially a press writing technique in order to be able to hold information on a page in order to see what it would look like when it's pressed onto, say, a newspaper or what have you. So if we type in lorem, we can then click this and it will fill us up with some garbage text, essentially. But for right now, it's really good to be able to see where we would put some more text later on. So we can have that here. So I know that we're going to have 2 paragraphs worth of this. So what I'll do is I'll drop down again by hitting enter. I'll type that P tag, and then I'll type in some more lorem as well. I type in lorem, hit enter, and it fills out this space for me. Let's go take a look at what that looks like so far. We save the file, we go back to our browser, we refresh the page, and cool, we have 2 areas of Lorem Ipsum. Very cool. But if we look here, we have some nice spacing on the left and we have some nice spacing on the right. I think I want to do that as well. How do we do this? Well, CSS. CSS, of course, we can do it that way. So there's another way of handling CSS. If we don't want to use our CSS sheet that we created, our style.css, we can do something called inline styling. And this is a way, and I don't recommend always doing this, but there are some certain places and certain times where this is okay to do. We generally always want our CSS to be in style.css, but perhaps we just need to make a quick change on the fly, or we just need to style this one thing specifically, and we don't want to have to deal with an entire style sheet. We can do inline styling. And what that looks like is if we access the element that we're trying to style, and we stay within the carets of it, but right after the name of it, we type in style, we tell it equals with an equal sign, and some quotation marks. And again, those quotation marks stay within the carets, but after the equal sign. From here, we now have access to styling this specific tag with all of those same properties that we had on the style sheet. So in this case, I'm going to do something. I noticed that we need some margin on the sides. So what I can say is I can say margin 50 pixels. So I know that I want about 50 pixels worth of space on each side. What is a pixel? Kind of hard to explain the measurement of a pixel, actually. It can be different per size of a screen. For me, I've just been doing this so long that I know about 50 pixels work pretty well. You can put anything you want here as far as different pixel sizes and play with it. You're not going to break anything permanently. Have fun with it. I just know right now that looks about, from eyeballing it, 50 pixels worth of space that I need. Now, with this again, if I want to add more stuff to it, such as maybe I want to have my text aligned to center, so that way it looks kind of good with my header that I have there, that Jumbotron, I need to give it a semicolon to separate it out. This tells the CSS, let's escape from the current property we're working with, stop it there. This is all the code that property needs. Now we're going to talk with another set of property. So I put a semicolon there, still within my quotes, hit enter, I'm sorry, space. And then from here, I can add another property. So for this, I'm going to do text-align. And I'm going to, with this, give it a colon. And I'm going to say center to this as well. And I'm going to end it with a semicolon. Great. So let's take a look at what that first paragraph looks like now that we've styled it. We went back, we refreshed the page, and cool. My first paragraph is not only given 50 pixels on each side of it, and top and bottom, but I've also got my text centered nicely. Any questions so far about inline styling? Cool.
My text is still left aligned. It's the second line is not centered.
Correct, because we haven't added that styling to the second element.
No, I mean my second line of my first paragraph is not centered. It's left aligned. Like
so like this line here that you're talking about?
Yeah, I don't know.
Okay. Is it perhaps because it's being dropped off? Can we look at your code if you don't mind?
Yeah, I think, well, I might have missed something here. Hold on. Let me see.
No problem. That's what we're here. We'll take care of it. All right. Okay. So if we take a look at your P tag on line 23,
Yeah.
we can see we have style equals and we have margin with 50 pixels inside of quotes, but we don't have the text align center within quotes too. We needed those within the same set of quotes.
Same set of quotes. So I need a quote. I needed to bring it over here.
Exactly. So let's put it right after that semicolon, actually.
Oh, after the semicolon.
Yep, because that semicolon is part of that styling property. So let's put it right after that and let's save.
How come I have 2 colon?
Oh, it's because VS Code likes to think is being helpful by adding 2 for you. So let's just put that. And if there's another one there, just delete the next one. That's all.
Got it.
Perfect.
Let's save and then. Okay.
There we go. Cool.
All right, good.
Awesome. These kind of little things are so common, even with senior developers and junior level developers all the way through. You will run into these no matter how much you've coded in your life. You will still constantly run into these small little issues where it's like, oh, I put my semicolon in the wrong place, or I left my quotation mark somewhere else. It's so normal. So don't worry if you're running into that. It still happens to this day.
I would say that that's something that Learn Academy does a lot in, our workshops, but also our classes is pair programming. So, someone's driving or, typing out the code, and then there's a navigator who's looking at it and kind of spot checking it. So that's, what Andy did is very similar to what we do in the class. Great question.
Yeah, absolutely. Pair programming is super essential, I think, when it comes to learning how to code, especially that's why we teach it here at Learn Academy too. You have a second pair of eyes sitting with you the entire time you're working on a challenge or some code that are able to spot those kind of things for you. Because as you're typing, as you're coding, there's a lot to try to think about in that moment. You're trying to think about the syntax. You're trying to think about how do I style this correctly? And your job as a pair programming partner, one person is a driver, one person is a navigator, and that driver just codes, while the navigator is essentially looking out for them, making sure that if they do a typing error, or if they do place the code in the wrong place, for instance, that navigator is able to see it and pick it up pretty quickly, because 2 eyes are always better than 1 generally when it comes to this kind of stuff, especially when you're first coding. There's a lot of companies here in San Diego as well, not to go on too much of a tangent with this. There's quite a few well-known companies in the tech industry here in San Diego that all they ever do is pair program. They'll pair program even for emails, which I think is a little extreme in my opinion. But they do that because they want to make sure that everything they do is extremely efficient. And this is a common practice all over the tech industry. So just want to mention that too. I'm really glad that Lisa brought it up. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen real quick. And I do want to mention here that it's about 11:30 a.m. When we get to 12, we'll take, I'll say maybe a 30-minute or an hour break, and then we'll come back and we'll finish up the rest of the site. But we'll make sure that we have a completed website today. I just want to make sure that around lunch, we get some lunch and we take a nice break from everything. Okay, cool. So we've done this to our first paragraph tag. In order to do this to our second paragraph tag, we can either type it all out again, or let's be what's known as the normal programmer here and be lazy. We can just go and copy everything from that final quote to the beginning of the S, copy it, go to our second paragraph, and hit paste. Put it right in. Real quick here. Great. So if we save this, even though it has the exact same stuff, it should be applied to our second paragraph now. Cool, we've got it there. So now we have 2 nicely stylized paragraphs. And from here, we can move on to our next elements. So we're progressing nicely. So we have our header we've created. We've got our paragraphs. While not quite as big, we can just add more Lorem Ipsum to them if we want to really make it match. This on the wireframe has it all left aligned. I wanted it centered. I think it looks cooler centered. It's totally personal preference. It's up to you. And then from here, it looks like we have 3 columns using an image and some text below it. So we have 1, 2, 3 an image, some text, an image, some text below it. So I think this would be a good place where we can think about like maybe a small gallery view, or if I was a retail site, say an e-commerce site, maybe this is where I would have, say, an image of a product that I'm selling. I could have that here with some information about that product that I'm selling. So let's go back to my portfolio site. I think specifically, so down here is where we're going to start adding it. So we'll make some space after our P tag. And then let's go to Bootstrap. Let's go back to that website of Bootstrap real quick, because we're going to use some more components. Our P tags were easy. We didn't need to use components for that. But when it comes to these kind of things, we're going to have an image. We're going to have some text below it. I think what we're looking for here is more than likely kind of like a card that fits in there. So let's see what the components offer us. We have alerts, badge, breadcrumb buttons, and hey, look, card. Let's go use card. So Bootstrap cards provide a flexible and extensive content container with multiple variants and options. Ooh, that sounds just like what I want to buy. And oh, there's an instance of one right here. We have an image, we have some text, and it even has a button here that we could link to something else if we wanted. So that's really quite cool. Let's see what else they offer us. We have one if we just wanted straight text and no image on it. That's cool. Oh, here's one without the button. So it looks like this matches up with our wireframe a little bit better. Let's do that. So let's do this. So we're going to go down here, take this one right below the example, the live example of it. We're going to take that code for it. We're going to copy, go to Visual Studio Code. And then again, like we did with the header, the Jumbotron, we're just going to paste it right in. So this gives us some cool stuff. We have a container here that has some inline styling to it to know exactly. So REM is another measure of unit, another unit of measurement in CSS. Some people use REM, some people use pixels, some people use percentages. It just comes down to your personal preference and what you're used to using the most and what you use more often than not. REM is really great. It's fantastic. I think it's a good way of actually doing it as well. I just, for right now, learning how to code, I would stick with pixels a bit. That doesn't mean we need to change what's right here by any means. We can just leave that as is. It's pre-styled for us. That's great. So if we drop down one level inside of the parent element that's wrapping everything else, we can see that we have an image source. So this is an image tag. And with this one, it's a self-closing tag. It's pretty cool. It doesn't need a ending tag and it doesn't need a slash for it. There are some very specific tags out there, like I mentioned earlier, that won't require a closing tag whatsoever. So just want to mention that. We have an image tag here. It has a source of where it is looking for its image. Right now, it's just ... because we need to input an image into it. It's not going to display anything for us. It has a class of card image top. And this is important when we're creating our image. We have an alt tag. Some people like to say, don't worry about the alt tag or anything like this. But what the alt tag is, it stands for alternative text. This helps people who are differently abled that are using maybe screen readers or are having issues with eyesight and they need something that helps them read the screen for them. They generally might not be able to see an image very well. So with this, an alt tag, we would have some sort of descriptor of what our image is, that screen reader software they use or hardware they use will read out to them what that image is. So then they're still included when reading through our web page. This is very important to me. I think it's a very important thing to do, and it's called accessibility. So as long as we can make our websites and everything that we do when we code accessible, we are reaching a far wider audience of people and making the websites and the internet more accessible to them. So a little bit of a rant there, but I think it's very important that we always utilize our alt tags when we're creating our images. So for right now, we're not going to mess with anything here. We're going to take a look a little bit deeper into our div class card body, and we see, hey, there's our buddy again, a P class, a paragraph. It has some class elements, some styling done to it thanks to Bootstrap. And inside of there, we have some basic content here that we can change out to be whatever we want, just like we did with our Jumbotron. So for right now, before I change anything, I'm going to save the page with just this one card on it because I want to see what it looks like on my site first. So I'll go back to my site after I save that file. I'll refresh it and cool. It almost looks like I want it to. We have a broken image here because we haven't given it an image to work with yet. And then inside of here, we have that example text, that boilerplate text that it gave us. We can start working from here. We need 3 of these so far. So in order to help visualize it a little bit better for us, I think I want to change out this image source to be something that we can work with. So with that, I think we'll go to Unsplash just to get a placeholder text for us or a placeholder image for us. Let's go back to Unsplash. Since this is a portfolio site, I'm going to assume that I'm a coder and this is my coding portfolio site. So I'm gonna go look for some kind of cool coding. So programming images. Let's close this out of the way. Ooh, all of these are kind of cool. Look at that. All of these are neat. So maybe I'm showing off some code that I've written. We'll just pretend that this is some really great code that I just wrote. We'll download this image. And again, I'm gonna make sure that I name it something meaningful. So I'll say, we'll say gallery 1. Not too meaningful, but it explains just fine the way it is. So gallery 1, I know that this will go to that gallery card image 1. In fact, let's make it card image 1. I'll save this to my assets folder that's inside of the folder that I'm working inside of. We'll hit save. We'll save it as a JPEG. Now we have card image 1. If we go back to Visual Studio Code, we open up our Explorer, we look inside of assets, we'll see we have this card image 1.jpg. Great. So with that, just like we did with our others, actually, instead of having this images inside of my assets, I want to teach you guys something else. Let's say I want to actually link to an image that's hosted somewhere else on a different website. I don't recommend doing this all the time, but I think it's important for you to know how to do this. So take everything that you just learned right now about saving the image and all that, put it in the back of your mind. We're going to learn something else real quick. So with this, what I can do is I know that this image is over on Unsplash. And as long as I'm having this website not actually hosted anywhere, I can have it on my local machine and link to that image elsewhere onto a different website. This is something you generally shouldn't do if you're ever going to host this site. But for right now, in this example, I think it's important to know how to do this. We can right-click this image, and it's important that we can click on copy image address. We don't want to copy image. We want to copy image address. This will take a URL where this image is found directly to it and put it into our clipboard, a full URL that's ready to be pasted into our source area. So on source, we can highlight these ... we'll remove them out, and instead we will simply paste what we were given. Just one second here. Great. So with this, I'm going to save this file. I'm going to go back to my portfolio site. I'm going to refresh the page, and there we are. There's the image ready to go for us. That image is technically not on our computer. It's not hosted with this site. If this would be hosted right now, it's hosted still over on Unsplash, and we're just linking to it and saying, hey, if we want an image, this is the image we want. This is hosted over there by them. Again, not necessarily best practice to do this, but it's important to know how to do this. Otherwise, if we wanted, we could still do it the old way, the other way, which I think is way more important to do. Let's go back and take out the src, the URL we just put inside there. So we're saying inside of these blank quotes, we can now go to /assets, just like we were doing inside of our CSS when we were trying to access the background image to add to it. We do /assets, and then from here we type in card image 1.jpg. Let's save that. We'll go back to our portfolio site. If we refresh, we see, cool, it's there, but it's just not linking somewhere else on a different hosting site. Another part about linking to somebody else's hosting site is, besides one, it's considered kind of rude to do. It's another thing too, is you're at the will of them to make sure that they keep hosting that same image and never change that URL. So if later on down the line, say a month or two from now, they decide to remove that image from their site and you're linking directly to their site for that image, you're now going to have a broken image on your site and should have just hosted it yourself. You should have just had it in your own assets. So that's something else to remember. But we don't have to worry about that now. We downloaded the image to our computer. We have it inside of our assets folder. We're linking to that image, which we know is never going to go anywhere unless we delete that image ourselves. So now we have that. Let's add 2 more of these and get pretty close to what our wireframe is asking for. So we're going to copy this whole set from 28 down to 33. We're going to copy it. I'm going to put a space here, right below it. I'm going to paste it again. And I'm going to do the same thing. After that paste that I already did, I'm going to put a couple more spaces by hitting enter. I'm going to paste it again. I'm going to hit save. And I'm going to go refresh my page. And if I scroll down, I have 3 card elements there. Excellent. Close to what I want, but they're stacked on top of each other. We need to get these centered and nicely spaced. If we look at our wireframe, they're centered pretty well and they're nicely spaced with one another. There's some ways that we can do this, and I'll teach you. So instead, the way the code reads out is from top to bottom. So it's looking at it and going, okay, we have code here, we have code here, and we have code here. They must want it stacked like that. Well, with CSS, we're able to do something called a Flexbox. We're able to make it display in a flex pattern to where instead of it being stacked on one by one, even though code is that way, our CSS will override that and tell it, no, we want the second one right next to it. We want the third one next to that second one. The way to do this is we need to wrap all 3 of these elements that we just created inside of a container, specifically a div container. And you'll notice that div is all over the place inside of our code so far from everything we've copy pasted. What divs are is think of them as Tupperware. When we create a div, we're essentially taking a Tupperware container and then we're putting stuff inside of it. So really, that's the best way I can explain it. It's just a container for other elements to live inside of. So when we have this big Tupperware container of a div that we're going to wrap everything else inside of, we're telling our code, we want our card inside here, we want another card inside there, we want all 3 cards inside of this container that we have. So we're going to go back up right below our p tag. We're going to drop down just a little bit, make some space. I'm going to hit tab in order to be able to move all the way from my left to my right. And then I'm going to type in left caret div right caret. And this opens up our div for us. You'll see that it needs a closing tag. This is one of those things, one of these base elements that requires a closing tag in order for it to be completed. But that closing tag's in the wrong place for right now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight this text, this code. I'm going to copy it, and then I'm going to delete it. But I have that closing tag inside of my clipboard, so I don't need to worry about it. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to drop below the first one, the second one, and the third card. And I'm going to put that closing tag down here. So what this is doing is it's wrapping all of these elements inside of that div that I just created. From there, I can start working with that div and styling that div in order for it to affect its children or its child elements. So this div is now the parent element, and those cards are the child elements. Very similar to how when we were working with our Jumbotron up here, we have our parent element, that is the Jumbotron. We have a child element container and its nested child element of H1 and P tag.
Can you just repeat that, where you're putting those again? Just,
Absolutely, no problem.
Yeah. Under the second P style,
Correct.
You typed a div.
Yep, I typed in div right here.
Okay.
So what that is it's going to be sitting here invisibly right now. It's sitting right below these paragraph tags, but above the card, the very first card.
Got it.
So we have it below the paragraph tag, but above that first card. And then the closing tag that it requires is going to sit after the very last card, but above all of this JavaScript stuff down here.
Okay.
So we have, I know this is kind of a lot.
Can you show me the very bottom of those 3?
Right here.
It's, okay, so we want another one down there.
Right.
Another div.
Correct. So it's going to be a closing tag div though. So that means it's going to have the slash in front of it because every div requires an opening tag and a closing tag for it.
Oh, it has to have a slash.
Correct.
Okay.
That slash denotes that this is a closing tag to that parent element div. Even though we have a whole bunch of different divs over here and those have slashes as well, those are relating specifically in line with the other parent divs or these other child divs.
That very top div up at the top of the three,
Mm-hmm.
does that have the slash again? Or no, that just
No,
is,
because it's an opening tag. We need it to open up. That slash is only for closing the tag up for us.
and then does it matter, like that div right there is sitting in line with all these other code paragraphs or whatever you call code sections, but the very bottom div that has the slash is moved to the left. How do those?
Are you meaning like, say, these?
Very bottom, keep going down, that the bottom of the three, keep going some more and more.
Mm-hmm.
Right there, that one's to the left now. Does it matter? That needs to be all the way to the left, even though the others are indented and then indented?
Yeah, great question. So technically the code doesn't matter, but for our eyes as developers, yes, absolutely. Because we want to keep one thing in mind. We're writing code, but this code is not only going to be seen by other by computers alone, it's going to be seen by other developers who are going to look at this code at some point. And that other developer sometimes, and a lot of time, is you. And you need to be able to see easily how code is written. So with this is called indenting. So we see that this div, if we follow it all the way up, we have a highlighted line. This is showing us where it's actually in line with. So yeah, we can see that this one's a little bit farther left than this one is up here, which is a great thing to point out. We should make that in line with it. So now this parent div, its starting div, if we follow that line all the way down, ends with this one. And it makes it so much easier for us to be able to see where the opening and closing divs are for our elements. So great thing to point out. I really appreciate you doing that. Does that make a little sense?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Cool. So again, as far as the code understands, it doesn't care where it is. As long as it's like reading from top down in the right place. As far as left or right, not so much. But for our eyes and being able to understand it, absolutely, it should be properly indented. So cool, great question. So now we have this parent div that's wrapping all of these child elements for us. We need to tell this parent div how it needs to handle its children, I guess. We need to style these children specifically with this parent div. We can do this by using that thing I was mentioning a little earlier, some inline styling, and using something called a Flexbox. So let's see what that looks like. In order to do our inline styling, can anybody tell me what I have to type in order to start inline styling? Style. Yes, Serena's got it. Perfect. Yes, so we do style equals, then we have our quotes inside there. From here, we can now start adding some properties to our style. So with this, I'm going to tell it that its display property needs to have a flex to it. So what is display? Display says, hey, to this specific element, we want to do something to how it's displayed. And specifically with this, we're giving it the argument of flex. We want it to be able to flex that display in certain directions that we will tell it to in a few seconds. So with that, we've made this parent element have display flex. We then want to tell it to justify our content in a certain way. These things are specific to Flexbox. Just to understand a little bit more about Flexbox, Flexbox was created not too long ago that allows us to move content, center it either left align, far right align, center it, similar to how we can center our text, much easier. Someone I know, I can't remember exactly who it is, but somebody here at Lorem Academy said, has this great quote, and I'm kind of throwing it apart here and paraphrasing it, but it's the idea of it was easier to put somebody on the moon than it was to center an element on a web page. And that is absolutely true. It was super hard to do up until the advent of Flexbox. So they created Flexbox for us as these little CSS snippets of code and properties that makes it way easier. So we have display flex. We end it with a semicolon. Staying within our quotes, we're going to add a few more things. We want a property of justify dash content. And I hit tab in order to autocomplete, or enter will autocomplete it as well for me. And I want to have some space around each one of them. So what this is doing is it's going to say space around, and it will move my content, anything that's inside of this parent div, its child elements, it will move it up to have perfect space around and aligned correctly. So let's see what that looks like as is. So we'll save this. We'll make sure that we have display flex, justify content, space around, semicolon, all within these quotes of style. Then we save the page and we'll refresh the page. And woo-wee, look at that. We're pretty much there. We got everything we might possibly need. We have our nice cards there, 3 of them. Oh, they're still looking exactly the same, and they have some basic information inside of them. They are nicely moved out from being in that vertical styling to being in a horizontal style with perfect even space in between each one. So that's some of the beauty of the CSS that's available to us. We don't have to do these weird calculations of figuring out, oh geez, how much space should be between each one. And if you do something like, say, move your web browser around, we're already starting to get some of that responsiveness. We're making it mobile friendly already without having to do a whole lot of extra work. If we make it smaller and smaller, it does the calculations for us and making that space for us as well. If we go even smaller, it will do its best, not perfectly, but it will do its best to make sure there's still some nice spacing in between as we get smaller. So let's go back to our normal size. All right, so that's pretty good, but I'm also thinking it's kind of smashed right up the bottom of my page here. No matter how much I try to scroll down, Mac does this cool thing, or I should say Chrome does this cool thing of giving us a little bounce, but really all of my code is kind of smashed at the bottom here. I want to give it a little bit of margin. I want to say that whatever's coming right after it needs to have some space against it. So like say 50 pixels is what I'm thinking. So I'll go back to that parent div right after my space around semicolon. I'm going to give it margin as well. I'm going to do margin, colon. I'm going to say 50, 50 pixel. But margin, specifically, when you call on margin by itself, it takes 4 different arguments. So we have, I believe it's going to be top, bottom, left, right, is from what I understand on that. So with that, I'm going to give it 50 pixel margin to the bottom and 0 pixel to the top. So I think it actually might be bottom, top, left, right. I'll have to look into that exactly for you and get back to you. But we're going to do this, and it should give us some nice styling to the bottom here. Just a little something. There it is. It gave us about 50 pixels worth of space at the bottom of our page before the next element will start or the page ends, one or the other. Cool, cool. All right. So let's take a look now. Let's just for, I want to save time, but yeah.
Could I just really quickly test your code? Because I'm in a column. I'm not getting a row.
Oh, sure. Absolutely. So we want to make sure that this div is wrapping all 3 of those child elements.
Right.
So we want to have display flex, justify content, space around. That should be the bare minimum that you need in order to be able to get them into a row.
Okay. So what I have, can I share my screen?
Absolutely.
Let me look at it real quick.
Sure.
Okay. So I think I've got it because this div should be wrapped down to here.
Mm-hmm.
And then is my style line right?
Style equals display flex. That's looking good. Justify content is looking good. Space dash around. That's looking great. Margin 50 pixels, 0 pixel. Yeah, that's looking good. Let's refresh your page. Oh, interesting.
Still in a column.
Huh. Let's see. That is strange. Can we, just for, it's probably not the same issue, but refresh the page one more time, and can we maximize the size of the page?
There's no div, there's no second div within each section, like right there where the pointer is. Right there, that section, no, down line 28, shouldn't there be another div on line like 33?
Oh, yeah, great point. So your cards are missing a closing div for each one of those. So we have that div, that closing div on line 32 is relating to line 30.
So that should actually be.
You should have another one. 33 should have another div.
There it is. Yep,
That's what you
precisely.
want
Let's
to
add
have.
another closing div there.
Thank you.
Yeah, right there.
And then
Okay.
we're gonna need to do that for line 39.5 and probably 45.5 as well.
Awesome. Thank you, Carla.
Yeah, great. Excellent catch. Love it.
Thank you.
I'm peer partnering.
Yay!
That's literally what pair programming is. Yeah.
That's exactly it right there.
That's great.
Cool, cool. All right, guys, it's 11:57 a.m. I want to give you guys a nice lunch break, just a few minutes early here. We're coming back from lunch here. Just give people a few minutes to return, and then we'll jump right back in. Hope everybody had a decent lunch.
So, Andy, I know you were, showing us how to put images on there and things like that in this, but would there be an easy way to learn how you could provide links? Like if you below these, or if you clicked on one of these images, you could hyperlink to perhaps, I don't know where you'd put it, if it have to be in the cloud, but if you could link to something you wanted them that's embedded in that image, right? So something else.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll actually teach how to do some linking as well a little bit here, but that would totally be possible. It's called an anchor link. And what you do is you'd wrap whatever that image is inside of an anchor link. So that way it makes it clickable, and then you can tell it where that goes when they click it. Okay. So if you want it to go, say, like, for instance, even though you have it in your assets folder right now, and you wanted to actually say give credit to Unsplash, you could have it be clickable so it takes them to that Unsplash page so they can get it themselves too. So that'd be like one instance of it. Another way you could do it too, like let's say we wanted that card to go to another page of your website, maybe to expand on the details, like maybe it's just a preview image and this is linking to, say, if this is code, for instance, maybe I'd want it to link to where my code lives, say over on GitHub or another site. I'd be able to wrap it in a anchor link. When they click it, it would take them to that site where that actual code is found. So.
Yeah, I was thinking like if this were like a portfolio page and you wanted to show, say it was your drawings, your paintings or whatever, but they were saved electronically, you had them on your hard drive. Mm-hmm. But now you want to make them accessible from your website. If you did click on one of those cards, then maybe it has to be, I would think it has to be linked within the page. Even if you went to a sub page, one of your sub pages, I just don't know where that image or that document would have to lie, or where it would live.
Right.
You wouldn't want it on your hard drive. You'd need it some server someplace else, right?
Right. It would have to be served someplace else. So in the end, with this whole project that we're working on, what you could do, I don't go into detail about this or really teach this part. So this is something else for another time. But you'd get hosting for this website, and this website would live on that host. So that way you could type in a URL, say, whatever your portfolio is. Maybe it's, andyisaacs.com or something like that, whatever you want to name it. From there, you'd have storage there where it could link to wherever that file is specifically. So in this case, you'd have a preview image, which wouldn't be the actual file itself. You'd click on that, and then maybe it would give you a pop-up that allows you to download the specific image, or like the full-size image, for instance. If it's in a, say, some art or drawing or something, you could do that. Or you'd have another page where maybe it has it full size for them as well. But those are a little bit more advanced techniques right now that we're not really going to cover here. I will cover how to link to places, but that's something that you'll have to kind of research a little bit more about, or if you decide to really get into this a lot. One of the few basic things that you'll definitely be able to learn later on in life.
So the host, whoever's hosting it for you, does have a repository where you can store some of your assets, like with your portfolio documents or your images or whatever.
Precisely. Yep.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Andy, there was another question in the chat from Serena about the difference between Flex and a Flexbox.
Nothing. There's no real difference. They're kind of synonymous with one another from what I understand on that. There might be some slight difference there, but when we're talking about a Flexbox, we're really just talking about Flex itself. The reason why I say Flexbox quite a bit is because we're kind of making, like, our container, we can consider it to be a box, and we use that. If you want to learn more about Flex, there's a really cool website called Flexbox Froggy, and I can show it to you guys a little bit later on today. And it's one of the best places to learn how to play with CSS, and specifically Flexbox itself. It puts you through these really simple challenges that you're basically just taking a frog and trying to put it on a pad correctly. I can show it at the end here before we head off, before everything's done. But it's really fun. Again, it's Flexbox Froggy. Yep, thank you, Lisa. And it's a really good place to learn about it a little bit more. Plus what all the other kind of properties that are available to you too to play with Flex, because you can do so much stuff with it. It's really cool. It's kind of crazy to wrap your brain around, but it's really neat. Okay, so any more questions before I jump back into this and we start wrapping this up? Good. Cool, cool. All right, I'll go ahead and I'll share my screen again real quick. Great. Okay, can everybody see my screen okay? We should be looking at the wireframe. Fantastic. Cool. So let's review. Let's recap a little bit. We've created our header, which we can see in our wireframe we needed. We have our little text area right below it, filled with Lorem Ipsum for now. And then we have 3 boxes that have a little bit of information. We can change out these images to anything we want. For the sake of brevity, I guess, I won't change them out. Maybe I will. We'll think about it a little bit more. But we can have any kind of images we want inside these. It doesn't have to be the exact same image. You know what? Why not? We'll just take a few seconds to do that. So let's go back to Unsplash and we'll just grab 3 random images. So I just hit the next button here. I'll take this one and I'll call this one card image 2. And I'll save it. And while I'm here, I'll go ahead and grab another one. Let's say, I'll move this out of the way here. Let's do that one as well. It kind of lines up with our general look that we have. So we'll download this one. We'll do this one card image 3, and we'll save that. We'll go back to our code. We'll pop it up here. And we'll change out. So we have our first card image inside of our div. We want to keep that one the way it is. We'll go to our next one. We'll change this one to card image 2. We'll just replace that 1 to 2. And with this one, our third one, we'll do card image 3. We'll save it. And let's go preview it, make sure it's working right. Refresh the page and boom, we have 3 individual cards with 3 unique images to them as well. Earlier, I mentioned the alt tag. This is important. I'm going to always say this is very important. With this, I want to make sure I describe what we're looking at here. It doesn't have to be an extreme description here. It needs to just say something, because the way screen readers work is that it will say a picture of, and then it will look at the alt tag text and say whatever that is. So we don't need to say a picture of code. We can then say, instead, we can say some lines of code on a monitor. So fairly descriptive. For the most part, it's kind of vague, but still it gets the point across. So the screen reader will read this alt tag and say a picture of some line of codes on a monitor. We'll go down to the next one here. Let's see what that actually looks like. Still a line of code. They're all pretty much lines of code. And for this, I'll say, let's see, I want to do some different lines of code. Again, these aren't super helpful. This portfolio site is never actually going to be hosted anywhere where anybody will use a screen reader on it, but it's just good practice right now to do that. So we were on that one. We have some lines of code there. And then here, we'll do this. We'll say first picture, first, let's do another set of code lines. So again, you want to get really more descriptive. I'm terrible at this, honestly, when it comes to like trying to do the alt tags. Generally, we don't have images of the exact same thing in 3 different places, and we can be more descriptive. So like if we were showing headphones, we'd say what type of headphones it is, you know, if they're over ear or something like that, we could do that instead. If we save our code here and we refresh the page, I'm not sure if it will do it, but sometimes, depending on what browser you are, if you hover over it, it'll actually show that alt tag here. But this, again, is completely invisible to us as normal users of the internet. but it does show up to anybody who is needing to use accessibility tools for themselves. Cool. So with that, we have some quick example text on each one of these. We can change that out to be whatever we wanted to say. Right now, that's fine. I don't really need to say anything specific. We'll just leave it as that so we can continue on with designing and building our site. So we have our 3 cards here. Good. Now we have some more interesting things about me. So we can see that's probably an H2 tag and maybe a H3 tag. Let's see here. So let's do this. Before doing that, let's make this a little bit more interesting. I also think it looks like, whoops, I clicked on that. Looks like there might be a list of items here too. So let's do just an H3 tag for now. We can go ahead and we can drop down below our parent div that covers all of our cards for us. We'll drop down and we'll just create an H3 tag. So we'll say H3. We finish up that caret for our opening tag. It gives us our automatic closing tag for us. And I'll say, here is a list of projects I've worked on. Because I know that I'm going to have a list right underneath it. So it just makes sense to describe it that way. Let's give it a period for some decent punctuation. Let's save that and see what it looks like real quick. This is common practice to be constantly like, you write a little bit of code, you go make sure it looks right. A good thing to do is to do this that way, because if you just keep writing code, and something breaks or something didn't work the right way, you won't exactly know easily where it broke. So if you do like one element, check it and go back, you can kind of keep on track with yourself in case something goes wrong and stop exactly where you are and fix it. So let's refresh the page again. We'll scroll down. Here's a list of projects I've worked on. Cool. Again, that's floating all the way to the left. I'm not a huge fan of that. I want to add some styling to it. So we can do that by accessing inline styling. We'll say style equals, then some quotation marks all inside the tag. And I'm going to go margin, but instead of just using margin by itself, I'm going to say margin dash left. So I'm targeting specifically the left. I'll do it a colon, and I'm going to give it about, say, 25. Well, what did we use up here for it? Let's reference. We used 50 pixels for that, so let's give 50 pixels here too. So 50 px. And we give it a semicolon to end that line of code. Go back, as always, we refresh, and cool, that's a little bit more in line with everything else we're using. It looks way better. Cool, so we have our header to our list. Now we need to create a list. To do this, it's a little bit more difficult, but it's okay. We're going to use some new tags. We're going to drop down a line here. And what we're going to do is we're going to start an unordered list. We can have ordered list and we can have unordered list. I'll show you both of them real quick, but we'll start with the unordered list. In order to do this, we need to open it up with a left caret and we type in UL. UL stands for, you probably guess, unordered list. With that, right off the bat, I'm going to give it a class. I'm going to give it an equal sign. I'm going to give it some empty quotes, and then I'm going to close off that tag. We'll get back to that class a little bit later. I'm going to hit enter so I can drop it down. So now I have this unordered list parent element. And inside of there, we need to create a list item element that is going to be a child to this unordered list element. So from there, it's pretty simple. All we need to do is type in left caret li for list item. We'll give this a class as well, equals some blank quotes, and we'll get back to that in just a second here, and close that off. So it needs a opening tag and a closing tag as well. With that, we can type in anything we want. I will just, for this sake, I will say project 1. If I want continuous amount of these, like I want another one, all I have to do is copy and paste this into the next one right below it, all still within that unordered list parent element. So for this, we'll call this one project 2. But before I do this, actually, I want to go ahead and talk about these classes here. So I'm going to give it a list group item. And really, this is the hard way of coding this out. I bet Bootstrap has some available to us that make it look even better than what our normal HTML can offer us. So let's go back to Bootstrap and see what it has. All right, so we have components. we looked through all of these. We were last working with card, and we have some list groups. Cool. So these are some really nicely styled ones. So before I get into this to show you like the difference between the two and why we'd use Bootstrap, let's see what our normal UL and LIs look like. We'll just copy these a few times so we can get a quick preview. Save that, go back to my portfolio site, refresh the page, and down here, cool. We have some list items, but they're kind of lame. They're not very cool. They're not styled out very well. So we use Bootstrap instead. This is the exact same thing, but with Bootstrap styling put to it. So it looks a little better. And hey, look, they basically built it the exact same way if we look at the code. We have a UL, that's a parent element. It has a class. We have list group inside of it. We have an LI class that has list group item as a child element inside of it. Each one of these is styled. It gets its styling from its class. So just like we were manipulating the classes earlier, with Bootstrap, it's looking at that class, specifically one that Bootstrap made called list group, looking at it inside of its CSS sheet, its style sheet, and grabbing list group item and knowing that if we use an LI below it, using a class of list group item, then it will apply these cool CSS designs for us. We have a whole bunch of different variations of these as well that we can use. But for right now, I think I just need this very top one. So with that, I actually don't even need to copy this because we've written some of the code. We just need to give it these names. So we have list group. I'll copy that. And right in here, I can either paste it in or I can type it out, but I'll just type it out. List group. Now I know that the child elements are going to need some class styling as well. So we'll type in list group item. And with that, I'm actually just going to go ahead and copy these over. Delete these out. And I'm going to put, say, maybe 4 or 5 of them here. So 4, 5. I'm going to rename each one of these so they're easy to distinguish. 3, 4, and 5. I'm going to close up this extra space I don't need. And I'm going to save. So again, we have our parent UL. It's holding 5 child elements inside of it of list items. Each one of these has their own class, but we can reuse these classes over and over again, even though each one is kind of unique as to what it has in its body. So let's save this and go take a look at what it's done for us. We'll refresh the page and, oh, cool. We have this nicely styled thing. It's no longer just a pure bullet point there. We have some cool lines that are going through. It lists out each one of our projects. It's taking up the full width of the space though. I'm not too happy about that. So what we could do in order to make sure that we confine it to a smaller amount, we can list this unordered list and put this unordered list inside of a parent div. So let's do that. So we'll drop down below the H3 because the H3 is fine. It's not going the full width of the page. I'm going to create a new div. So we do that with left caret div. We'll give it a class, or actually, no, we'll just give it a style for some more inline styling. We'll do equal. We'll give it some quotation marks, and we'll say, we'll give it a max width. We'll do width. Let's see, is there max? No, let's do max width. And we'll say, let's do 200 pixels. I'm not sure exactly how well that will look, but we'll see. We also need to close that off with a right caret. And of course, VS Code being super helpful to us, creates our closing tag that we need for that div, but it's in the wrong place. So I'm going to copy that out, erase it from here, and I'm going to drop it below our closing UL tag. So /div, and it created it for us. Now with this, I was mentioning proper indenting. Since these are child elements of that div class, I want to indent them. So I can highlight the entire set of text here, and I'm going to hit tab once. And this just helps, again, for our eyes to be able to tell what is a child of something and what is a parent. It doesn't really matter to the code itself, but it matters to us when we're looking at it. We can tell that this div closes up, opens up here, closes here, and is a parent to all of these child items inside of it. Let's save that. If we go back to our website and we refresh, we can see, cool, our items now are no longer expanding across the entire width of the website, taking up all of those columns. We now have it as basically a single column. I want to also notice that over here, we don't have much spacing. So what can we do? We can add a margin left to it. So if we go to the parent div, inside the style, inside of the quotation marks, right after the semicolon, we'll say margin left 50 pixel. Then we give it a semicolon to close it off. Let's save it again, and one more time. Cool. Now it's nicely set inside of here. If we wanted to create some more list items and say like a whole bunch of different ones here, we could do so. If we want to expand the size of that list, which I think I might want to do, maybe to at least be the width of this, what we have here, all I have to do is go back to my inline styling and add some more pixels to it. So it's at 200 right now. Let's try 300. Should be close enough. Save it. In fact, let's do 500. Let's go crazy. 500 pixels. I save my file, refresh the page, and there we go. Pretty close, close enough. Good enough for the government. I'll take it. So there we go. Now we have these list items. We have a list of projects I've worked on. If I wanted these to link somewhere, and this is where I'll explain a little bit about linking, and then I'll go into other ways we can use the same anchor tag link. We can link these to something specific. Now, since we only have a single page website, a lot of places that we would have, say, some of our projects we worked on, especially as coders, we use something called GitHub. And GitHub, before going into some crazy detail about that, GitHub is basically a place to store repositories of code. So I might want to host this, or maybe have all this code packaged up into a repository on GitHub and have a link to it. But right now, I'm not going to do that, but I will create some links that I can have as clickable items right now. So we'll go back to our code here. And inside of here, what I can do is I can wrap this entire LI, this list item, with something called an anchor tag. So I can go left caret A, starting with that. And I can type in href. So A stands for anchor. We do href equals, we'll have some quotation marks here, and I'll just kind of leave it blank for right now. We'll close that off, and it gives us immediately our closing tag. But again, like the divs, it's in the wrong place. We need this anchor tag to wrap the entire element that we need to be clickable. So I will take that anchor tag off at the end there and add it to the very end of my list item after its closing tag. So now inside of the href, I can give it the URL that I want it to go. So for right now, since I don't have any real place I need it to list at, just as an example, we'll use HTTP, we'll do https://www.google.com. So what this will do is it will make this child element, this list item, clickable and link to another website that's outside of my own. So if I save this, just to see as an example, and we refresh the page, this has turned blue. In fact, anywhere I click, not just on the text, makes it super easy to get to that website. If I click it, it brings me to Google. So that's how you make a link, and you're able to go somewhere else. You can also link to within your own site, and I'll show you how to do that a little bit later, but it's going to be very similar. Instead of linking to, say, Google in our href, we'll link to a page that's within our site. So that's how we can create a link.
So, sorry, can I interrupt? How did it know Google? How did it know?
Because we gave it the href of Google here.
You know what? I didn't even, oh, sorry. Can I see that where href is equal to?
Yep, right here. I have it highlighted for you.
Oh, okay. Got it.
So that's all sitting inside of that anchor tag right in the beginning, the starting anchor tag. We give it those parameters that we're looking for.
Oh, dang. Okay.
So if we want, we can have it link anywhere we want. If we wanted to say, like I was mentioning earlier, say GitHub, we just replace Google with GitHub inside of these quotation marks for href. And href again stands for hypertext reference. We could do this in any other places we want to. We can literally make anything clickable with an anchor tag by wrapping it with it. So for instance, let's go back up to our cards here. If we wanted, we could wrap this whole card as a clickable link. So if we wanted, we could do a href equals, and then in fact, let's be lazy here. I already copied it. Actually, I didn't. Let's go back down and grab it. We can take this whole href class, tag, I should say, and we can, just for easy sake on our eyes, start it here. We'll take the ending tag and move it to the very last. So now that is wrapping as a parent. We'll tab that in just a little bit here. We have our href here starting. It wraps all of these element items inside of it and closes here. So if we save this and we go back to our portfolio site, we can see now some basic styling happens anytime we use an anchor tag. If there's text, it will highlight it as blue as a clickable thing, as a link. We can now see that if I hover over any part of this element, it gives us that little click icon. It changes our cursor for us. Clicking that will take us to GitHub because that's where I use my href for it. So that is just a way that we can use our anchor links and be able to make anything a link to something else if we want it to be. We don't have to wrap the entire thing. In fact, what we can do is we can just take out our href and target only certain areas. Maybe I only want the image to be clickable. Let's close this off too. So I can put that anchor tag here, take its closing, remove it from where it is, and put it to whatever I want it to wrap. So in this case, I want it to wrap my image. So we can see that it opens up here, wraps only the image, and then closes. Let's bring that in a bit. So if we save this, we go back, we'll see my text is no longer clickable. Other areas of this box aren't clickable, but the image itself is clickable. And that will take us to GitHub again. Any questions about it?
Can you put that code in like chat
Sure.
or something, just so that I don't have to waste your time looking at it? I just wanted to see where you did that, or.
Sure thing. So let me just pull this up. Here we are. So href, yeah, I'll just type this here. Let me steal the code real quick. There you go. So it should be in chat for you right now. So again, we have an anchor tag, which is an href property to it. Inside of the quotation marks, whatever we're going to be linking to, where we want our user to go. And then inside of the body of the anchor tag, we then have whatever we want wrapped, be it an image, some text, a whole element if we want, a whole section of our site if we want to be really crazy about it. I don't recommend doing it, but you can. And then we make sure that it ends with that closing anchor tag with the slash. Very similar to how we do it with divs. Every tag that needs a closing always requires a slash.
So you put it needs to go right under that div line 45. It needs to go right under that, and then it knows that it's applying to that card only.
Is applying to that image only specifically.
That image, I mean,
yeah. You can place this anchor tag anywhere you want, but it's whatever it's going to be wrapping around it. Because if we think about it, it's like the tag is just being inserted in and wrapping around whatever code that we want to be clickable. So I'll remove this from here, remove this from here. And again, just another example of this. Let's say I only wanted my text to be clickable. So I'm going to move this out of here. So maybe I don't want absolutely everything to be clickable. I very specifically only want a part of my text to be clickable. Maybe if my text was a little bit longer, we'll say project 1 where I did something cool. Maybe I want only project 1, that part of the text, to be clickable. All I have to do is wrap it with an anchor tag. So I do href. We have some quotation marks here. And I'll say this one goes to github.com. Now, my closing anchor tag wouldn't be at the end of the li. It would be at the very end of that word, or in this case, a number. I would put it there. So it can go in line with anything else and make it clickable for a link. I can save that. If we go back now and refresh the page, oops, I think I did something a little bit wrong here. Yes, I closed it up early. VS Code was trying to be helpful by giving me that anchor tag in the wrong place, but not quite. So I save, go back to my page. I can now see only project 1 of that text is clickable. So again, that's just how we wrap some areas in order to make it a URL. We'll do HTTPS because it doesn't like it when I do it like that. HTTPS://. footer.github.com. Let's refresh that page, and there we are. If we click that, that should be working better. There we are. Okay. Any other questions before I move on? Great. Okay, so now we have a list here. That's super cool. It looks like we're almost done. It looks like we need that footer though. We're gonna need to have a footer maybe with a copyright text on it. And you know what? We'll probably want to make it a little easier for our users to be able to scroll back up to the top as well. So we'll add something extra to it. I'll get there in a little bit later though. So in order to create a footer, footers are kind of a pain to create actually. It's hard to keep them at the bottom of your screen. I personally really enjoy having footers that kind of move around with me as I go through this page, but it's totally your call on this. I'll teach you how to create something called a floating footer. So let's go down, we'll drop down a few lines of text and we'll start working from there. So in order to create a footer, it's really just a div, but since HTML5 came around, they gave us a specific tag that is really good for SEO purposes. So again, for our footer, we only use this tag when we're absolutely at the bottom of our screen. It allows Google to be able to tell where the bottom of a web page is. Okay, so to do that, we can type in this new tag called footer. And we can go ahead and close it immediately.
To a facility and to a place, but this time we get a chance to broadcast you.
Earl, I think your mic is live. There you go. Cool. All right. So with footer, we have that open. It needs an opening tag and it needs a closing tag denoted by a /, like with any closing tag. Inside of here, we can put some kind of cool information that we want. Let's see if Bootstrap has anything available for us. Let's go back here. And let's scroll down. Does it have anything that relates to a footer? Let's try a search. Footer. Ooh, component card types, header and footer. Oh, so we have an optional header and or footer within a card. Not exactly what we're looking for, but kind of. Let's see if there's anything more that we could use. Let's see, let's use a quote is kind of cool, but I don't really need that. Let's go back up. Nah, we'll just do this. So we have an optional header and our footer within a card. I think that's specific to this. Let's actually, I'm trying to think a better way of going about it. I think we could probably just use a container class. I wrote some of this code ahead of time, but I'll share it with you and we can do this together. I'll write it out completely. So we have a footer. Let's give it a class of equal footer. So we're going to access this class a little bit later. And from there, inside of the body of our footer, I'm going to tab in just a little bit here. I'm going to make a div. This div is going to open and close, so I'll expand that out because I know I'm going to need some stuff inside of the body. Inside of the div, let's give this one a class as well. This class will be equal to, we'll say container, because I'm going to steal some of the Bootstrap information. We know that container has some cool stuff going on up here. I want to make sure that we have it here too. Now, what I can do is I can do a, let's say, instead of a p tag, we can also use something called a span. Usually spans are used inside of a paragraph tag in order to do some inline stuff to our text. But in this case, I'm going to use it in a very specific way. So with span, all this is doing is basically saying that this is some text in this area that I want to use, very similar to a paragraph tag. Span also requires an opening and a closing tag. So inside of here, I'm going to say just copyright 2020. And with that, I'm going to have it say Andy Isaacs. Put my name in there. Cool. Then from here, I'm going to go ahead and drop down this one because I know I'm going to have some more information I need to do. I want to have span style equal some quotation marks. I want to have some specific styling to it. And then I'm going to do float right. Now, what is float right? What this is doing is it's saying that anything that's inside of this span, for its styling, I want it to float all the way to the right of my screen. So it's a little bit different from using Flexbox, but this was one of the older ways. You can either float left or you can float right, and it doesn't always work the way you want it to, and not as well as Flexbox. But in this case, I know that I just need it slapped all the way to the right of my screen. Because what I'm going to do here is I'm going to add a little bit of text wrapped inside of an anchor tag that will allow our user, when clicking this text, to go back to the top of my screen. So with that, I have my span style float right. So we know that anything from this point forward inside of this span will be floating all the way at the right of my screen. I'm going to close this up. And then immediately I know that I'm going to need some text. So I'll say back to the top. Maybe not necessarily spelled like that. And with this, if we stop here and take a look, we can start to see it already kind of working for us. So inside of our footer, we have our container, which is going to hold our span information. Let's make sure this is nicely styled up. Let's move this over a little bit. So now we can see everything that's going on here. We have our span that opens up here, it closes here. We have another span that opens here, because technically this is still one line, and closes up here. Great. Let's save this and see what we got. Refresh the page. And so far, we don't really have anything going on. Maybe I didn't save it correctly. No, we're doing good. We'll save this. Oops. Go back to my portfolio site and we'll refresh the page. And let's see, it's not showing up on my page in the right place. It's missing. So let's do an inspect and see where that might be. I might have not closed it off correctly. We'll see. So we can see here in our footer class, displayed block. It looks like it's there, but it's just not displaying correctly.
It might be invisible because your container class has white text.
That might be the thing. That might be the thing as well. So let's take a look at that. Maybe we should take off that container. Let's take this off for now and just see what's going on here. We have that closes up here. Span, let's just drop this down so we can see this nicely. We have everything closing up correctly. And the footer itself might be doing something strange. Yep, you were right. It's that container issue, that class that was already being used by our Jumbotron. It was giving us white information. So we have this information here, copyright, we have Andy Isaacs, and that span specifically that says back to the top. It's all the way over there. We'll style it a little better, but now we have our basic functions for a footer there, our basic design, I should say. The elements are there. So with that, let's give this some cool styling. We know we have footer here. And just in the sense of, since we've been using inline styling, we can still use some inline styling even though we have a class footer. So let's use that instead. We'll type in style equal. We'll put some quotation marks there. And we need to know that this thing is always going to be at a fixed position of our browser. So we can give it something called position. We'll open it up for some arguments by using the colon. And from there, we'll say fixed. And then we end that with a semicolon. Then I also want to make sure that I want to have, is it copyright? Thank you. Appreciate that. All right, now I also know that I want it to span the entire width of the page, absolutely. So I'm gonna do it with actually, I'm jumping ahead of myself here, I apologize. So we have position fixed. Now I need to know where that fixed position is going to be. And I know that I want it to be at the bottom of my browser. So I can type in bottom : 0. And with that, I don't need to give it pixels or percentage or anything like that. It just knows that the fixed position is going to be at the 0 position at the bottom of my screen. From there, I'm going to give it a width to make sure that no matter what size my screen might be, it needs to be 100% of that size. So width, 100%, semicolon to end that off. And I want to make sure that the background isn't transparent. I want it to actually have a full colored background. So in particular, I'm going to go background color. So this is a bit different from background image. Instead of using background image, we're using background color. This is another selector that we have available to us. we have a colon, and then we type in white. We know that this will work for us. If we wanted to go look at the hexadecimal color for it, it'd be like F5, 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 I think is what it is. But in this case, we can just use white and it should work just fine for us. I'm gonna go ahead and save this. So this footer class spans all the way around, wraps all of our other child element code inside of there. Let's go back and take a look at what that looks like now. Cool. So it's at the bottom of the page. Excellent. But we'll notice if we scroll up, it stays with us as well. It's right there, ready to go. So it's always going to follow us. So at any point, if we want to, when we get to this in a second here, we're going to have this back to the top. They don't have to scroll all the way to the bottom of the page. They'll be able to click this button at any point and go right back to the top of the page for us. Let's make that happen. Let's make that work. So here at back to the top, what we can do is if we want something to be an anchor tag, or if we want something to be clickable in a link, because that's really what we're making is a link here, we need to wrap it with an anchor tag. So we'll do that with a left caret A, href equals, and we'll leave this blank for right now as far as our quotation marks go, and we'll close off that tag. We'll grab its closing tag, and we'll put it at the end of this span, because I want that whole thing to be clickable for that specific text. Now with this, what I need to do is I need to tell it to target something. So we can target other sites, we can target images, we can target other pages inside of our site, but we can also target specific elements on our page as well. So to do this, we tell it that with a hashtag, we tell it to look for an ID of top. Now we need to create that ID on an element somewhere in our code in order for this to actually work. Right now, as it stands, an ID of top, that's what the hashtag stands for ID. And that hashtag is also, when we use CSS, if you're ever seeing this inside of our CSS, you might see some of these as this, perhaps. Those are called IDs. Then we have classes, which are denoted by a dot. So that's just something to keep in mind. Not super important for right now, but the difference between an ID and a class is one starts with ID, which will be a hashtag when we're targeting it, and one is a class, which will start with class, but when we're targeting it, it would be more like this. Top, kind of. That's not the exact syntax, but a dot usually denotes a class. So again, we have our href, we have ID of top. We can go up to the top here because we know that's what we want it to do. We'll find some element up here that we know can be our top. So with that, I think I want my Jumbotron to be the top of the page, of course. So what I can do here is I can just simply jump inside of the div class of the Jumbotron. Right after the class, I can add an ID equals quotation marks top. So if I save this content that we've created now, this new code, we'll save it. And we can go back down and double check our href down here is targeting top, this ID of top, which is found all the way up here on this element of the Jumbotron. Let's go back to our portfolio site and try it out. So now, right now, just because we added an ID to the Jumbotron doesn't mean anything's appearing for it. It's just a way for it to be descriptive to the code what it is, to identify it. If we scroll down the page a little bit, we can see that our footer follows us, and now it's also clickable. If I click this button, it brings us right back to the top of the page because it tells it, okay, let's move up here. We're not leaving the site. We're just moving to wherever that element of that ID exists on the page. Any questions so far? Cool. So we have copyright 2020, Andy Isaacs. We have a back to the top. It's not exactly styled well, in my opinion. I think we should change that out a little bit here. And let's try this. Let's see if we can make it look a little bit better. So with this, we'll go down to where our footer lives. The code for our footer lives right here. And I'm gonna check something real quick as well. Nope, we're good. All right, we're good, doing good on time as well. Cool. So we have this span here that is talking about the copyright and who it's to. I want to add a little bit of cool styling to it. I want to see if this is available to us. Let's do class equal text dash muted. Now, I believe that Bootstrap has this as some styling that's available to us. I've looked into the code a little bit, so I just happen to remember that this is there. I've also got some side of the code here too available to me. So I'm going to try this, and it should just give us a cool styling to our text. If we refresh it a little bit, cool. It just mutes the text out just a little bit so it's not so bold and in our face. Now we have this here. Let me just double check everything. Let's do this. We have our float. That's looking pretty decent here. I want to say that this should be a little bit bigger. So I'm going to add some more information to my class style. It's inline styling. If we do height, I want to make sure that the height is a little bit bigger than just this really skinny thing. We can do height, say, let's do 100 pixels. Might be a little big, but we'll try it. Let's go back to our portfolio site. And well, yeah, that's way too big. We don't want that. So let's tone that down just a little bit. Let's maybe make it like, say, 50 pixels. Cool. We'll go back. We'll adjust that just a little bit. And that's a little bit better. That makes a little bit more sense. My text is kind of weird. It's kind of floating all the way at the top of this element. I might want it to be a little bit more centered. Let's see what we could do here for this. We could do maybe some text align. Text align. Let's see. Because if we look inside of our style CSS, we use some of this. We have text align center. Maybe we want something else though. What else is available to us as far as text go? We have text align, text transform, render, anchor last, align last, all this kind of stuff. Orientation offset. Offset sounds like it might be what we're looking for. In fact, let's just Google it. You can't remember everything in code. In fact, you really shouldn't try to remember everything in code. That is a fallacy. That is just not possible. It's just impossible to know that everything about code. So in this case, Google is our best friend. Let's take a look. How to align text vertically in CSS. Let's see if that's what we're looking for here. Horizontal and vertical align. We can center elements horizontally and vertically. And this is w3schools.com. It's fantastic. They have a great resource, tons of documentation when it has to do with HTML, CSS, JavaScript, pretty much any language you can think of. This is available to you. So let's take a look down here. This div element is centered. Let's see, we have a margin of auto, margin 50, padding at 10 pixels. Oh, we could use some padding actually. Let's try that. So we have text align centered, which will make our text centered here, but we need it to be centered from the top, just to the center, but not directly absolute center. So let's try this. For our span class, let's do padding top. Let's say we'll give it about 20 pixels. We'll do 25 pixel actually. We'll give it that. So what does padding do for us? Padding, while margin, we have the difference between padding, we have a difference between margin. Margin will move whatever else is outside of it down, but padding works on the inside of that element specifically. So when we add padding to it, it's saying inside of that div, inside of that container that we have, we want to take whatever that the elements are, or the items inside of it, and pad them into a certain position. So with this, I'm saying I want to pad from the top 25 pixels down, so about half of our 50. Let's see if that will work for us. If we go back, cool. That actually does kind of work for us. Maybe a little much though, it's a bit aggressive. Let's do say 15 pixels instead of 25. There we go. That kind of centers it a little bit more. Even though that we have this is all kind of white here, we can see that it's padded down just a little bit more. Maybe let's add one more thing just to make it a little easier to read. Let's do this. Let's do at the end here, let's drop this down. We'll say a border top, because I want to see a little bit of a border. So I want to put a border to the top of my div. That will be 1 pixel. We'll do 1 pixel and just see what it offers us with that. It might give us some default styling. Not quite. Let's look up how borders work better. So CSS border top. so we can see all the arguments that it takes. Cool. So we need to tell it three things. We need to tell it the size that it's going to be. We need to tell it what it's going to look like, if it's solid or dotted, and we need to give it a color specifically. So from here, we can go 1 pixel, space, solid, and black. And we end it all off with a semicolon to let it know that, hey, this is what we're looking for. We're done here with this specific parameter that we're looking for. Selector, I should say. Let's save it. And there we go. Now we can see that border a little bit better. It's not too in our face. And we can also see that padding extremely well too. Cool. So we're just about done here. We have, if we reference back to our wireframe, we have our header, we have our body, we have our cards inside of that body, we have some list items, and we have a footer. And our footer is a little bit more dynamic than just sitting static at the bottom of our page. It follows us around. Plus we added a back to the top button as well. But I think we could add just at least one more thing. And let's take a look at what Bootstrap offers us. Since we have a portfolio site, I maybe want to have something cool like a gallery. So let's see what we have. Most galleries are generally considered, especially ones that move on their own, they're called a carousel. And we can see here in the components that we have a carousel available to us as a component that's pre-made. It's pretty cool. So it gives us some good documentation telling us how it works, a little bit of jargon. We can slide down and see what we have as far as different carousels. Ooh, we have one with controls, so we can slide to the left or to the right. That actually seems like it'll do the job we want. We have ones with indicators letting us know which one we're on. That's cool, but I don't really need that. I just wanted to go through each one. I want to cycle through each one on its own, one by one. So let's go back up here. I think I'll use the one with controls because if somebody sees something they like and wants to stop on it or it moves by itself, they can go back to it at any point. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to simply copy this code below the example of the one that I want. We'll go back to Visual Studio Code Editor. And above our footer, but below our last items, our list items, I'm going to simply paste in this code. Now, at first, when we go to look at this, an example of it, when we actually see the preview of it, it's not going to look very good. It just won't. But we can at least see it working, kind of. We'll refresh the page after saving our file. And we'll see that it's not really doing anything we want here. So let's go back and see why. So I think the reason for it is that it's all collapsed because we don't have images inside of it yet. So we need to go out and get at least 3 new images to fill up these SRCs. Because right now, they're not doing anything cool for us. So let's go back to Unsplash. And with this, we'll just show off some maybe us coding. If this was a photo of us, that looks pretty cool. Let's download that one. We'll say Gallery 1. We'll just call it Gallery 1 for easy. Gallery 1. Let's do Gallery 2 for this one. Grab another image. Save it as well. Let's see if there's anything else that's kind of cool out there I might want to use. That's kind of neat. Why not? We'll do this for Gallery 3. Gallery 3. These are all saved to my assets folder. We can access them again like we did with our cards at the top by just changing out this image tag SRC. So we'll do // We'll tell it the folder that they exist. This is in assets. And then we can just scroll down and either type it out or we can take the selection from it. Since we save things to assets, VS Code is super cool and showing us everything that we have available to us. So we'll take Gallery 1 and put it there. Excellent. This also has an alt tag. We'll get to that later. We can take this same code, copy it, and paste it in and replace those ... So instead of Gallery 1 here, we want Gallery 2. We'll save that as well. And we'll repeat it one last time with Gallery 3. And let's save this and see if this makes this work for us now. We save the file. We'll go back to our browser. We'll save. And boom, our gallery has come alive. It exists because it's been able to expand out by having images inside there. So just know if you first put that code inside there and it doesn't appear, don't freak out. We just need to add images to it in order for it to actually expand out. Without images there, it kind of collapses on itself because the gallery only exists to the size of the image that it's put inside of it. So cool. We can click left or right, and we get these nice sliding motions and images available to us. Again, this is the time where I would go back and put in some alt tag, make sure that these images are well described for those accessibility tools. But for right now, I think that's good. I'm pretty happy with our site here. We have a very good foundation for us to be able to change some of this Lorem Ipsum and change out some of these example texts to be something that's a little bit more meaningful that we might want. So that's the majority of it. We've pretty much reached our goal here. We have our header, we have our body with some text inside of it, we have some cards, we have some text below the cards, then we have a title, I should say a heading, some list items inside of it. We made a footer that's floating around with our user that has the ability to go back to the top, and we added a gallery inside there. We can style all of these elements in unique ways, which we have. We have a CSS document that we can apply these styles to, or we can style inline with the style tag that goes inside of each one of these tags. And now we also have a gallery where if we wanted, we can wrap these gallery images with links as well to have them go somewhere. Does anybody have any questions?
Andy, sorry, can you copy the code for the footer? Because I have a bunch of issues and
No, sure, no
doesn't
problem.
look as it should. Thank you.
Absolutely, I'll send that to you. So I will take this whole bit here and I'll send it to you in chat. There you go. How's everybody's project looking? Cool? Yeah? Awesome. Well, that pretty much concludes it here. We've got through every one of those steps in the wireframe. We've got all these cool things going on with it. We know how to use HTML, we know how to use CSS, and we know how to use Bootstrap to complement all of it, to really kind of create a lot of these elements that would take a lot of time to code by hand. We can just take them from Bootstrap and then modify them to be what we want them to do and look specifically to us. So I highly recommend that, again, don't try to remember all of this. The best thing you can do is just know where these documentation and the resources for it. So for Bootstrap, if you can't remember how to import it in, you can go to the Bootstrap website and it has that quick start guide and it shows you exactly what you need in order to get it in. If you can't remember how to do a styling, like specifically say padding or border top, like I couldn't remember, there's no problem. There's nothing wrong with just Googling it real quick. W3C Schools is a fantastic resource. Mozilla also has a resource, whole repo on a whole bunch of cool stuff in there that teaches you about HTML and CSS and all that. But what I showed you today here is just how to create a basic website that has responsiveness. So again, if we look, we're able to modify the size of our window and it responds appropriately to it. So this makes it mobile friendly. Our header is scaled down, our text resizes and moves around based upon what our viewport currently is, and it's mobile. You can look at this on your phone. If you upload it to say GitHub, or if you decide to get hosting for it, you're able to upload it there and then go to a website and see it. You can do that as well. So any questions so far at all?
Yeah, I just have a random little one about
Sure.
Was Unsplashed.
Yeah.
I've just got, mine's not functioning the same way that yours is. My download button looks different and it's not giving me the option to go into anything except for my downloads folder. Do you know, are you signed in or?
Let's see here. Yes, I am signed in.
Okay,
that's also the thing. If you sign up for it, you should be able to get that download instead.
Cool, thank you.
Absolutely.
I was able to download images without having to sign up, though, Brian.
I was able to download the images. I wasn't able to get them straight into my assets. They were going,
gotcha.
They were going into my download folder, and then I had to
move them to it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that happens sometimes. Okay, cool. Well, that's all I've got for you guys. I hope you enjoyed this session. We try to run these, I think, every month or so, Lisa? Right about
Yeah. So we appreciate you all coming out and sticking with us. So please share some love for Andy and the workshop in the chat box or with the reactions. I think cool things about this workshop is that you can see Learn's teaching style. So this very much mimics how we run our virtual classroom. We're 100% virtual right now. And that's kind of the plan, until things drastically change. So we do really try to combine the power of Zoom and screen sharing in the chat box and also Slack in our classroom to make it as close to the in-person learning experience as possible. You guys got to see how we use screen sharing and pair programming to help troubleshoot. So just some housekeeping before you go. I did share in the chat box the link to our website, our YouTube channel, and our meetup. So we will be sharing the recording of this workshop in those different places. We also will be running other workshops and events like this on Meetup. So definitely join our group on Meetup to stay up to date on anything we offer in the future. We have a virtual networking alumni panel that's coming up next Friday. We also always run every 2 months our weekend jumpstart. So that basically builds on what Andy showed with HTML and CSS and includes more about JavaScript and makes it a bit more of a dynamic page. And that is a weekend program. It's a Friday night and then 8 hours on Saturday and Sunday. So it's 20 hours of full instruction. And our next one is happening on October 9th through 11th. It's normally a $499 cost for that workshop, but I'm typing here into the chat box now the 50% off discount code that you can use, Learn at Home. And so you're only paying, roughly $250 for that weekend workshop. And what that does is it also lays a great foundation for our full-time program, which is 16 weeks, 9 to 5, Monday through Friday. And that really ramps up your skills to, if you are looking to get into the field of software development, you can do that boot camp to take it to the next level. But in the meantime, we're going to continue to offer free workshops on Meetup in a virtual environment and continue to offer our weekend course as well. So thank you all for joining. Really appreciate it and take care.
Thanks for hanging out with me today, guys. Hope you learned something fun and cool.
Awesome.
Oh, sorry. Can I ask one last question?
Sure.
How often do you have the meetups?
So we do meetups roughly like every other week. We try to do, so like on Friday, the virtual networking session that I was talking about, for example, we try to offer things that involve our extensive alumni network here in San Diego every Friday, or every other Friday, sorry, around lunchtime, so like at noon. And we do post those on our meetup page, in addition to like sharing it with our, internal network of alumni. And then we offer workshops like Andy's, roughly like once a month, I would say. And then we also have virtual open houses where it's more like, this is what our virtual classroom environment is like. You get to meet all the Learn instructors. So those are some of the events that we are offering.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm. And Carla, did I answer your question? So I did share the weekend program is normally $499. With that discount code, you can get 50% off.
Great, thank you.
Awesome. Well, thanks for asking such great questions, guys. All of you were, in the chat or unmuting. We even got some screen share going. So hope that we're looking forward to see your websites. You can always chat. Andy, do you want to share your, or did you already share in the chat your LinkedIn?
I'll put it in the chat right now. So you can always reach out to me.
You can show it to Andy.
You can always reach out to me on LinkedIn and I will grab it right now. You can reach me at LinkedIn/IN Andy Dean Isaacs. Awesome. Feel free to reach out to me, connect with me anytime. You have more questions about anything, I'm so happy to help you. I think coding is fantastic. So I'm happy to share any information I possibly can.
Yeah, great. Well, have a wonderful weekend, everyone. Thanks for joining, and we'll see you in the next one.